Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast, is brought to you by you. If you want to learn how to support our podcast network, head to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Constellation, Last Stand Media's conversational podcast. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today I'm joined by only one special guest. His name is David Jaffe. You know him very well. David, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you today?
Thank you, Colin.
Oh, wow.
Well, yes, you see. Let me tell you something. I'm good. I'm well. I'm great. I'm well. I'm good. Is it well or good? I'm well.
You're
I'm
well, yeah.
I'm well. I'm well. I'm tired. I was up late playing a bunch of video games last night. This is actually just this guy on my Discord made a Twisted Metal role-playing game, like using the D&D rule set, like a tabletop. And so I played it, but of course I had to dress up and blah, blah, blah. So I had this and a hat and I had so much fun. And I saw that the Dungeons and Dragons player handbook, which is, I think, the new edition, the first one in like 10 years, just dropped a couple of days ago.
Right.
It looks scrumptious. I can't wait. I'm really going to, I think I'm going to kind of start to lose myself into D&D. It'll be Satanic Panic here in San Diego for me, but it's so cool. And now I have people I can play it with. When I was growing up, I really didn't know anyone that really wanted to play it. So I was just sort of, salivating over the art and the manuals and all the modules and shit. And now I'm just like, oh, I can actually do this. So I ordered it from Amazon. I can't wait for it to come. And it's cool, man. I'm digging it. But anyway, yeah. So
good.
Point being is, yeah, I don't know. I was up late. I was playing a bunch of games. I finished a horror game called Hollow Body, which I'm telling you, man, this was made by one guy. It looks, it's Silent Hill 2 inspired. I liked it. I didn't love it, but it definitely has a lot of really cool, interesting stuff in it. And other than being a genuinely solid, good game, like I gave it like a 7.5 out of 10. It's delightfully paced, made by one dude. And if I were to have told you this was a PS2 game from that time that just was never released, most people would believe me. The only thing that's probably a little telling that it's not, other than quality of life improvements that it has, is just they don't have a lot of monsters. Like, they have the same kind of 3 or 4 monsters, but it's only like a 5-hour game. It's kind of crazy what one person can do these days. It's delightful. I love seeing, that democratization of creation. I think is just going to lead to some really cool stuff.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, at some level, the low barrier to entry is both a blessing and a curse, just depending on it's really not for game development. It's a curse for storefronts.
Yeah.
But as far as people getting access to engines and tools, middleware, assets, it's good shit. Yeah,
I mean, we see it across all medium. I mean, I think you and I are both the beneficiary of that democratization of broadcasting, right? And so I think to be, to look at it and go 10 years, maybe I don't know when it really started, but 10, 15 years ago, you couldn't do this. I couldn't do this. It just wasn't available. I don't believe. I mean, podcasts were, I don't know when podcasts really sort of
podcasting began in like the mid-aughts.
Okay.
As we understand it. Yeah. I mean, and that was like a very fringe thing at that time. I did my first podcast in 2007. So.
Okay. Right. So, and so in some ways it's so hard to find a podcast, right? Because it's exactly the same thing in games. There's so many podcasts. There's so many YouTube channels. There's so many videos that, it's almost like the storefronts have somehow, I guess in the terms of on YouTube, it's algorithm. In terms of podcast, I don't know. If I were to start a podcast today, I don't know how you market it. Maybe you just go out and buy ads on other people's podcasts. I have no idea, but there's just so many of them that I would say all of these entertainment mediums are having that same challenge that you are talking about with games. which is kind of interesting to see how they're going to solve it. Maybe games will take a similar tact. I mean, Steam does it with algorithm with they have a queue. I wish Sony would just rip off Steam, their PlayStation store.
Me too.
Because it's I'm not saying the queue is the best thing ever, but it's better than nothing. It's nice to every day you log in, and if people are listening and they don't know what I'm talking about, you log in and it's like, hey, based on your play history and based on how long, and I don't know what their quantifiers are, but it's probably things like you've played these genres so many times, you've stuck with these kinds of games so many times, based on 20 other things as well. These are the 10 games of the day that we recommend. It's delightful. It's delightful. It's like having a little buddy in GameStop back in the day who's like, hey, I know you. Let me show you some stuff that just came in.
I've said this before about a lot of the 8-bit and 16-bit 2D games that I play where I'm like, damn, this is so good. And then you go to Steam and it's got 70 reviews. And it's like, damn, man, if this game came out 15 years, first of all, if this game was on the NES, it would have been like a Stone Cold classic. If this was out 10, 15 years ago, people would have loved it. And now people just can't find this shit anymore. I do think a major problem, and why I love what we're doing at Lilymo, frankly, although we're not ever, we've sold maybe 100,000 copies of all of our games combined. So we're not like, killing by any stretch of the imagination, but we're at least trying
to be clear, comparatively speaking, for most small publishers of that size, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, we do not. I mean, we are always able to make the next game. I don't take any money. So the way Last Stand makes money on our games now is I basically have the rights to physically publish the games and then keep that money.
Gotcha.
But I haven't taken money since Twin Breaker, which was the first game I worked on. But we're trying to at least do something a little different. And it's not that appealing, I think, to a lot of people, but it's like a brick breaker. I really want to do a typing game. I've talked about that for several years. Like I'm really, really want to do a typing game. I think that would be so fun. Habroxy, like an arcade shooter, but with lots of modularity. So I just think you have to find, because like I get people's complaints when it's like another 8-bit side scroller, another Metroidvania. It's like, yeah, I get it. It's a lot. I think that Steam's tools from a community standpoint and a discoverability standpoint, like you said, are worth replicating. Yep. I love that when I need help on a game on PlayStation, the first thing I always do, unless it's a AAA game or an exclusive or something, is I just go to the Steam community hub.
Right,
and there's like these immaculate guides. When I was playing the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, there are these amazing strategy guides on there right in the community hub. People having good conversations about what you need to do and what you need to look out for. Great reviews that are bubbling up, and they're starting to get into that on PlayStation, which is good. PSN is definitely getting better.
PSN is I know they do the stars, but I want to say, I don't think they've started this yet, but I've heard that they're going to start doing text. People are going to be able to write their reviews.
Yeah. I think it's in beta right now. Some people are being given the opportunity to write, and that is so sensible, right? Because
of course,
the Steam thing though, it's like, all right, so they started rolling out the star scores on PSN, which is cool. But just the idea of tethering how much you've played a game to your review and the nature of that review is all anyone needs. That's why Steam reviews are always the most interesting. And that they're the most nuanced too. Actually, you might have heard of the game. Dustin was talking about a game, what was he comparing it to? I can't remember, but it's called Pilgrim. I don't know. It's like a horror game. I can't remember the name he was. It's like a very famous game right now. I can't think of it. Oh, not Bad Company. What's that game? Lethal Company. It's supposed to be kind of like that. Yeah. Lethal Company.
Oh, I see Pilgrim right here. Okay, it just came out. Well, no.
And if you read the reviews, I went on the Steam page and I was reading the reviews of the game, and I was like, damn, this is good shit, from the sense that people are like giving it good reviews. But then if you so thumbs up or whatever, but then if you read the review, it's like, yeah, there are bugs, there are this, there are that. The nuance is really nice, right, combined with how much a person's played, combined with their other reviews and the nature. Maybe you give them an overall score of reliability or whatever. Mm-hmm. There's a lot you can really do. And I think that would only be good for sales. That's why I think that they should invest in it,
And I think, I mean, I haven't used that much of the PlayStation 5's voice recognition, but obviously they should, I assume it's good enough, or even if you're not, that you should be able to, because typing with the fucking controller, it's like, that's too much of a barrier. Mm-hmm. But if you just want to sit there and hold your button down and talk into the microphone and have it transcribe, I think, the text adds a lot. What do you think about saying, unless you've bought the game and then played it for at least 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Like, I mean, or better yet, you have to have at least booted it up and played it for 10 minutes, and then you can type whatever you want. But you can't not have bought it, and you can't have bought it and not played it without leaving with you, and then you're given the ability to leave a review.
Yeah, I just think that's natural in my
Well,
opinion.
Steam doesn't do that.
No,
which
I know,
I wish
but
they did.
But I think that you look like a fucking idiot if you review a game,
Right.
and there should be I think there is on Steam like an ability to just thumb that down, tag it with shit to make it useless,
Yeah.
and send it to the bottom of the list. You know, It's funny that Steam is both. We've said this before, but like the most libertarian marketplace imaginable, but has like the tightest constraints about the way information is presented, the way developers can interact with the audience, the way the forums work. Like it's really it's a very interesting two sides dynamic that I think really works. And
I hope that Gabe is not one of the, every now and then you get somebody who actually is genuinely a good human who happens to have been really fucking successful and influential in their business of choice. More, it's usually like, oh, it's P. Diddy, or it's all this shit comes out, like, fuck, But Gabe so far seems to be, he's rich. Yeah, he's successful. Kind of Tim Sweeney similarly, I think. I don't know Tim that well or Gabe at all. But where it's like they're making smart moves and they're being great capitalists and all that, but at the same time, they still haven't forgotten the essence of sort of who they are. And so it's like Valve just seems to be like, yeah, we want to do good business, but we also want to do cool shit. And we want to do shit that the gamer actually gets. Whereas a lot of people seem when they get their success, they kind of lose that if they ever had it to begin with. So I hope that I hope they continue with that. I think Gabe, I was going to say, I think Gabe's probably on Ozempic just like I am, although his seems to be working a lot better. I saw a picture of him and I'm like, because usually whenever you used to see Gabe, you're like, God, I hope he's around for another 5 years.
Totally, dude. He's
like 350 pounds.
Yeah, with respect, like he was a fat dude.
Yes, he was. Now, don't say fat. That's not nice to call people fat, Colin. I learned that.
Sorry, yeah, you're not
I learned that. I learned that at your show. Yeah. But he, I think he's the bee's knees. I'm a fan of the guy, but I know what I was going to tell you though. So do you game on Steam at all? Or
I only play Lily Mo's. We upload our early builds to Steam so we can share them, and I just play them there. So that's all I do. That's why I have my PS4 controller right here. Yeah.
All right. I need to give you just, I've given you, it's like if Jesus came back and gave wisdom, I've done that for you once. And I've said, Colin, go try the streaming. And I'm sure you haven't yet. And that's fine. It's fine. But here's another one that you have to do because it will bring joy to your life, which is go to Steam this weekend, buy UFO 50. I'm sure you've heard.
Oh yeah, I've heard about that. That game is supposed to be excellent. Yeah.
It is you all over. I mean, it's everything it sounds like you love. The meta is interesting. The individual games are interesting.
Right. I was going to say, isn't the meta that the games actually existed or something like that?
There was a company in the fiction of the brand of the product called UFO Soft. And they invented a console that came out, I think it was 1980. And maybe I'm getting my dates wrong, but 80, 81, whatever, maybe 85. But anyway, and they published games for 10 years. And yeah, they basically, UFO 50 is their 50 best games. And so they play it straight the whole way through. They have facts about, oh, this game came out and inspired this trend in games. It's like it really existed. And it's led up by the guy who did Spelunky 1 and 2, but he's got like 4 or 5 or 6 other developers he's working with, indie developers, and they're all NES era games, brand new. They're not mini games. They are, real meaty, big fucking games. Well, some of them are, some of them aren't, but they're the same level of commitment you would make if you were making an NES game back in the day. And some are better than others. I haven't played them all yet. And one of the cool things is the first game I tried was one that was I think it was like the earliest one. It was some space guy, but as you move up through the decade, the actual technology that they let their developers who made these games in real life and in the fiction use advance. So by the end of the decade, I was playing a Metroid just now that was like, okay, it's so clear this is the end of the generation compared to what I played at the beginning. It's delightful. I have to assume it's coming to console, but It just dropped yesterday or the day before on Steam, so it'll probably be a little bit, but I think you're going to see it on a lot of Game of the Year lists, and it's worth your time, especially for you given your history and what you like and all that.
Yeah, I was only familiarized with it last week when I was reading Push Square, which is a website I always talk about. I love that site, and they're just really great. And I looked it up. They put up a story say UFO 50 is not launching on PS5 this week, and it's bumming us out. And they explain it in there, which is why I was familiar with it. But then they have a trailer in there, like a 20-minute video where it shows all 50 games. And I watched this video. It's like the whole interface is cool. The way you're picking the cartridges.
Yeah. They
look like little cards. And yeah, it's a very, very dynamic and interesting idea. I will definitely wait for it to come to console. But I assume they will have to port it there. It seems like console is where it would be most at home. Specifically, not even PlayStation, but Switch. I would assume you definitely want it on Switch.
Yeah, but if they do it on PS5, though, it'll be great. So if you load up one of them and it doesn't work, you can just kind of go and like blow the controller like an Astrobot.
Dude, they have if these guys are smart too, especially seeing what games like specifically Vampire Survivors has done, but a lot of games have done this like train sim and everything where like you can get nuts on PS5 with the trophies, like absolutely nuts. I don't know if you saw Vampire Survivors launch with 221 trophies. And
I didn't, but that's actually because I know you were playing that, and I'm playing it right now again on my phone. But I was like, oh yeah, it never occurred to me to play it on PS5 now.
Do you earn like 5 or 10 trophies like just randomly just for playing? Cool. It's so funny, but if they were smart and they wanted to get nuts with it, they can give each of those games their own trophy list, even if it's not a platinum, but rather you get like a downloadable list and you have a bunch of them. Then you have an overall platinum you get when you get them all. They should definitely do something like that. I think people definitely underrate how important that is to
when you
getting
say 200. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Are you being literal?
Yeah, literal. There are 229 trophies that Vampire Survivors launched with. And so they have this is like inside baseball that no one gives a shit about, but I'm sure maybe you'd be curious about it. On PS4, you have like your core PlayStation Platinum trophy list, and Vampire Survivors has that too. And then they would allow you to tuck underneath as a family a bunch of different lists. And PS4 actually has a maximum. So games like Train Simulator and others, and Minecraft, I think was one, had to make an entirely different list of here are like a bunch of new trophies, and nestled under them like a Russian nesting doll or whatever are these little lists like this DLC, this expansion, this expansion. So on PS5 there are no limits. So Vampire Survivors actually launched on PS4 with those two lists, like two separate silos. And the PS5 one launched with its core platinum list, which I almost have all of them. So you'll get the platinum trophy, but you'll get the platinum trophy with like 10% of the trophies. And then there's like lists for like expansions, weapons, effects, character unlocks. Like they really went nuts with it. I've never seen a game really do this. And I'm like, wow, if you're allowed to do this, I hope other developers are paying attention because you can get pretty nuts. And by the way, this is a game that costs $5. So it's not like they're like, oh, the game is mega expensive. Do what you want. It's like, no, actually, it's the exact opposite. So this is a nice little tool that's got Colin's attention. Right now,
it's interesting because the reason I asked you was 200 literal because the last game I was involved with that had trophies was Drawn to Death, which was PS4, and we were very limited. You know, it's like here's your platinum, and then I think the way they did it then was you can have one platinum, of course, and then here are points. 1,000 points or whatever, and
it's like you have to land between 12 and 1,400, I think, and each trophy is worth a certain amount of points. So you can have like 10 golds and no bronzes, or
that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm very surprised that they've in some ways it almost feels like inflation or something. It's like they're going to devalue them for people who because it's so easy and there's so many now. But
it's important that they're not hard to get, but that you have to do something to get them. That's the only thing that matters to me. I don't like the games where it's like start it up. Right. And so I sent you the link here in the chat if you want to see it, but you can just scroll. Like this is the way they've done it. And I just think it's a really interesting idea. So they're onto some stuff.
There are a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, but you have, so the DLC trophy. Okay. So all of those are the nesting dolls you're saying.
Right. Exactly. Like there is the core list with the platinum and then all the nesting dolls, but they're not attached. And some of them are attached to expansions, but most of them aren't, which is what I find so interesting about it. So you'll see like, they're calling them DLC trophy packs, but it's really like bonus stages, random weapons.
So you haven't had to buy that DLC to get those trophies?
Exactly. Okay. So they figured out like some sort of hack. Now, I don't know if Sony allowed them to do that because the game is so popular. Like even at $5, the game was only out for a few days in, I guess, August. It was still number 20 in Europe, meaning that like it's churning a shit ton of money. So they might look at it and be like, yeah, we'll let you do what you want, but I want to look into this for our games moving forward. The one thing we've done that no one else has done and no one still has done it. We're going to do it again with our next game. We made totally different lists for our PS4 and PS5 ports. So like they're not like stacks. The PS4 version is actually easy, and the PS5 version is hard.
What's the logic?
We just thought it would be interesting. Barry and I are both trophy people, and we were like, yeah, it kind of sucks when you get these. It started with the Vita and PS3, but then PS3, PS4, PS5. It's like, yeah, you get these games. Sound Shapes was a great example. Vita, PS3, and PS4. You play it 3 times the same way. You get the trophies all the same, or you can stack them, send your saves around.
I see. Okay.
It's boring. It's like, if you're going to have these games, even though they're free, wouldn't it be fun if, especially for games like ours, and we have a hard time communicating this, but it's like, you don't need to play the PS5 version of our games. It doesn't really matter. Like, you can play the PS4 version on your PS5, but it's like, what if we just gave you a reason to go back and play it again later and give you a different, maybe more difficult experience with a whole different set of trophies?
Got it. Yeah,
I like that idea.
There's no reason you were picking PS5 for the hard, PS4 for the easy. That's
no. Just we just thought it would. That's just what direction we went into. So we're about to announce our next game in the next few weeks, like a game. We're going to release it in October,
right?
And we're going to do the same thing, I think, with that.
Is this the one you talked about the show? I won't say what it is. Not the RPG one, the other one.
Yeah, it's people that are familiar with Twin Breaker will.
Okay, right.
Yeah,
will
like
cool.
it. And it's
I like those games, but they make me too nervous. They make me so nervous. Like, I'm gonna, it's like, it reminds me of pinball. It's like, I love them, but I can't. It's like when you're riding, I don't ride motorcycles at all, but it's like if you're riding a motorcycle really fast, I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's like, when you're hanging on, like, can you straddle that line between, like, you have control and you're about to lose everything and crash? That's kind of what those games feel like to me. It's like, oh shit, here it comes again. I'm like, fuck. Breakout was the first one I played.
Yeah, Breakout's really
Arachnoid was the
Arkanoid,
the arcade one. Arkanoid, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
And it made me too tense. It's so weird how.
I like playing with the trackball and all that kind of stuff. Like, I've always loved those games, and I told the story in the past, and I might have told you that, like, my friend growing up, his dad was like a businessman. He owned like a chemical like company or whatever, and his people would go to Asia all the time, and so one of his guys came back in like 90 or 91 with Arkanoid on the Famicom shoved into this. We didn't know what the fuck it was. It was shoved into like this device that you shoved into your NES to make it play. And it came with like a ribbon, like a cloth ribbon that you would pull it out because it was so tight. Like, that was the only way you can get it out. And we had no idea what it was. And that was my introduction to Arkanoid.
Was that how they sold it, or it was like a bootleg thing?
I don't know. I have no idea. And what's so funny about that is, like, 90, 91 is like, man, that must have been such an interesting time to go to Japan. No one really knew much about the game scene there and all of that. And yes, so this guy found this bootleg thing, and I'll always remember that because we had no idea what the hell this thing was or why it worked.
Did you watch the movie Tetris on Apple TV?
No, I didn't. I heard it was good.
It's really good, and it's all about that. It's obviously about Tetris, but you don't have to like or love Tetris to like the movie. But it's about I know I don't know him that well, but my ex-boss knows him real well. His name is spelled Henk. I've never known if you're supposed to say Hank or Hank, but it's Hank Rogers. And I worked with his daughter at Sony Santa Monica. She was real nice. Now she runs the Tetris company, but it was about him going to Japan to get the rights to Tetris, or not Japan, Russia, to get the rights to Tetris. And then he would go over to Japan and negotiate with Nintendo, and all of that's in the movie. But they frame it like it's like a thriller because he was in Russia during the Cold War. It's really good. But you're right, though, that there was kind of an exotic aspect about where these games were coming from.
Totally.
And when part of it was being young, right? You put, now, and also not having the internet, right? So you put something in, you don't know what you're going to get. You get it from Blockbuster. The box looks cool. Fuck it. I'll take it home and try it. Now there's no surprises except on Steam or itch.io. That's another reason I probably love PC gaming as well, is just because you can still be surprised, but it's pretty hard to be surprised in the console market these days, unless you're digging deep into the indie space of the PSN store. So
what did you, I know you were just getting, I think you said you were tired. You're 3 hours behind me. So and you were up late. So you're probably just getting awake. You probably haven't even seen much of it yet, but did you see my Concord story?
what was it, the Jeff Grubb story yesterday? He's like, yeah, we know now that there's going to be a Horizon Forbidden West remaster.
Oh, Zero Dawn.
Zero Dawn.
Even worse.
But then he said there's even a less exciting one that is in the works that may or may not be announced. Well, I've heard Days Gone, which I think that would actually be great, but I can't imagine it's Days. Is that
John's not going to
confirmed?
like that very much, though. He's not going to like that.
I know.
Yeah.
But I got a lot to say about that, but I'm Days Gone's not confirmed, is it?
Well, it's been reported by reliable journalists at this point.
Wow, that's a real surprise. I thought it would be like God of War 2018 or whatever, but I mean, I'm glad. I think it's a game that deserves more love than it got. A lot of people tell me that a lot of the hate came from the buggy release on PS4. And I didn't play it until it was on PS5 or whatever version they put out. I played on PS5. It's good. It's longer than it needs to be. It's sluggish in parts, and they should, hopefully they'll fix that. But I'm glad to hear, if that's the case, that it might get another shot at people discovering it. But I was very surprised. I thought that was just a rumor, but there you go, I guess. But the point is that where it's just remaster after remaster and bad service game after bad service game. And Astrobot is delightful because it's a look back at what was. But, where are those charming, soon to be beloved characters of today from Sony? Right? I mean,
yeah. They
have a real problem with that, I think. I in the past, I've said it and I've been kind of like, I'm on the fence with it, but it seems like that. Who's I mean, and you and I both, look, I'll be the one that spills the beans because I know it's not confirmed, but at your live show, we heard that Scott Rhodey had retired. And I haven't reached out. I haven't talked to him since I really started doing the stream. So I don't know if he's mad at me, or I don't know what his take is on me anymore. But I've always liked him and respected him. But, he was one of the last guys that was kind of holding that line. So assuming that's true, who's left? Except poor Shu, who's been relegated to Tokyo Game Show indie play keynote, which is great. I love Shu in the indie space, but I don't know. It's sad. It's kind of sad to me, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, it's sad to me too. I understand the focus on new things and new sources of revenue and new types of games that they're not familiar with making, but it seems very haphazard. And it's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because I think that they've been very canny at PlayStation of filling in gaps with second party games and third party exclusives. Mm-hmm. And I actually am of the mind that this year has been really strong for PlayStation on PS5, but not for PlayStation Studios. And people are starting to get frustrated by that. So when you see things like this come out and you see how much they've wasted and how much time they've wasted on it, and money, of course, it's just a shame because there is an opportunity cost to all things.
Yeah. And I don't blame them for chasing games as a service. I blame them for chasing it without any more intelligence at the helm, or any more experience, or any more vision. It's not a bad thing to say, Jesus Christ, look at all the money those games make, and our games are getting more expensive and there's less people playing them, or the same number of people playing them. That's fine. That's valid. That's good analysis of the market. But to not bring the right people on and to recognize when you don't have the right people to steer the ship, or to realign the ship, that's where the annoyance comes from. Like, what are you doing? What the fuck are you people doing? Another Horizon, Herman? Lego?
You've seen just the very beginning of what they're going to be doing with Horizon.
Fuck Horizon up its dumb fucking Horizon fucking face. I'm sorry. There's your quote for the box. I'm tired of it. It's like, it's not a beloved franchise. There have been examples of this, where, it's kind of like when Zaslav took over Warner Brothers and he's like, let's push all the Discovery Channel shows. It's like, nobody likes them. I'm not saying nobody likes Horizon. I know your audience is like, hey, fuck you. I like you. I get it. People like Horizon a lot, but it's not the crown jewel, or one of the crown jewels. That's Last of Us. That's God of War. It may not be anymore. And that's Nathan Drake. Maybe Astrobot. I don't know, but it ain't Aloy, whatever. Right? I mean, come on. It's a B franchise.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, but it's not what they want it to be. It's not what I think I don't know if it was Zelda or what it was, but I don't think this game ever really got, I don't want to say a fair shake, but a full shake because of it being obscured by other things. People's hesitance about Guerrilla's ability to deliver a game like that after doing shooters for so long. But I think that their intention with it was for it to be like an Uncharted level, God of War level thing. And it sells that well. So it reminds me, I think you and I have said this before, Jaffe, that I think it reminds me a little bit of like Sony's Avatar.
Yeah.
Where, you know, like, it's like, who likes this thing? I don't know. But, just made $2 billion. Okay.
No.
So
this is the show that came on after Friends that was guaranteed to be a hit regardless, because after that show, ER came on. That's what Horizon is. It's the show after Friends.
Fair enough. I am interested.
Congrats, Herman. You've made Caroline in the City. Good job.
I'm interested in what I'm interested in what ends up happening with Horizon, because we're going to get 5 more games at least. So the Lego game, the remaster, the NCSoft MMO, Guerrilla's multiplayer game, and the 3rd game in the series. So, and we were going to get the Netflix series too. And by the way, people are like, oh, they walked away from that because no one cares about Horizon. I'm like, no, they walked away from that because the guy who was running the show was accused of like horrible things. So let
me give you the pitch for Horizon 3. You ready?
Yeah.
You can have this. Sony, if you're listening, you can have.
I'm sure it's already well on its way, but go ahead.
It starts. How do you say her name? Aloy. Aloy's running through the jungle fighting a monster. It's kind of fun. It's okay. And then suddenly, boom. It's like 4 minutes in. Boom. Everything stops. And you sit up and the camera pulls back. And it was basically just sort of the dude or whoever you made in Bloodborne having a dream. And he's like, that was such a weird dream. And then you start Horizon 3, which is basically Bloodborne 2. Come on now. Come on.
I think that would really annoy people, but it would annoy me because I don't give a fuck about Bloodborne 2.
Bloodborne's the shit. Not even if you don't love the game, the world, the
it's
IP.
beautiful. It's the Castlevania game I always wanted, really.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it's too difficult for a lot of people. It's too obscure for a lot of people. But boy, that world and just the Charles Dickens meets horror, which is already almost horror. It's so cool. It's the best From Software IP I think they've done. I think that's got legs, baby. I hope they do something with that. I really do.
The whole Bloodborne thing's so funny because did we talk about this before? What do you think is stopping them? I have a theory about this, but I was wondering if you have a theory of the case.
Well, let's make the assumption for the moment that it is stopped, because I've heard, like you, rumors, and I've heard rumors from pretty bankable sources that they're doing something with it, but
I heard years ago that they were doing something with it. I don't know. Yeah. So
assuming that's not the case, I mean, practically, maybe it's a From Software political thing. Like, they don't want them. They do, like, Miyazaki wants to do something with it, and so they want to stay in his good graces, but they don't want to paint him as the bad guy, so they're just saying nothing. But I will tell you, and I'll tell you off camera, but there's also egos within Sony in some of the leadership positions. I remember when a certain game won Game of the Year over another game that was in the running for Game of the Year, and a person who had a vested interest in the one that didn't win was kind of a bitchy, snobby prick to the people who did win. And it wouldn't surprise me if this person might be like, well, no, I want this one to be the beloved franchise. I don't, and that's just me making shit up. I have no evidence of that other than the story I told about the Game of the Year thing. So my if I had to put money down, it would be a political thing with From Software is what I would say.
Yeah, my theory of the case is that so I think it all begins with Demon Souls and Sony letting that go, basically, and Bandai Namco coming in with Dark Souls. For people that don't know, Demon Souls was published and is owned by Sony, and they opted not to publish it. It's one of the last games, really major games, that they opted not to localize, I think for a reason, because they really missed out on that. So Atlas published it pre-Sega in the West. And I think From realized this, that we kind of have these guys by the balls now. We go to Bandai Namco, they kind of swoop in and grab us and grab the franchise that really should have been with Sony. Sony comes back in and says, we want another one. And they're like, okay. And I think that there are probably a series of very bespoke rules with them, including that no one's allowed to work on it but From. That's the only thing that's the only thing that I can think of that would allow this to go on for this long, because it's fucking absurd. Like, we all know it's absurd. It's absurd. It's crazy that this hasn't, in 10 years, almost, it'll be 10 years next year that the game came out, still runs like shit, still, like, you have to play it in an emulator basically to play it the way you would play it in the way you would envision in a modernity. And the only thing that makes any sense to me about them is like, dude, everyone knows, Sony knows, everyone knows you love it, everyone knows there's got to be some snag that they can't get over, and it has to do with From. So I think you and I are on the same page there, where we get a first right of refusal, this is our fee, whatever the case might be, we just don't want to do it. I feel like Sony knows. That's the thing.
Well,
it's like,
I mean, if you do look at the sales of it, though, right? Bloodborne, I think, is like 8 million, and it's not 8 million at full price. And up until almost basically having Days Gone confirmed, I would have said that, they said Days Gone only did 10 million. We're not doing a sequel. Maybe for them, Sony was like, look, dude, 8 million, and it's got a great fan base, but it's not worth the money it would cost to remaster, blah, blah, blah. But the fact that they're remastering Days Gone, now you're like, okay, there's money to be made off of, if nothing else, a remaster of the goddamn thing. But Bloodborne to me is like Twisted Metal in that, you don't even need to remake. You've got a great intellectual property that can make money. It doesn't have to be car combat. Bloodborne 2, even though it should, and I hope it is, but the world of Bloodborne is rich and interesting enough that you could do a lot of shit in that world. As a franchise, as a brand, you could do survival horror in the Bloodborne world and still make a proper Bloodborne 2. Mm-hmm. That's the real tragedy to me, is that, it's such a good world. It's such a cool world that they can own, and it's very unique in the game space. As much as Elden Ring is my favorite game of all time, Bloodborne is close behind, but Bloodborne is probably my favorite IP of all time.
Interesting.
It's just so well done. It's so interesting. So I don't know, man. It's nuts. It's nuts. They're nuts over there, Colin. They should have a contest like Willy Wonka, and it's like somebody gets the golden ticket and, passes the test, and they get to run PlayStation from now on.
Well, this is the thing, dude, is like, I have this joke with my old friend Nate, who I worked with at IGN. He worked at Xbox for a long time too, where we would joke around when we watch football games, being like, I think I could do that. Like, do you think I could be like a defensive coordinator? Sure. And like call the plays.
A coordinator.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, sure you can. And like, I don't know. I know football very deeply, but I don't know nearly enough about it to do that, right? But there are things that I've said in the past, and I always use Star Wars as an example. I'm like, yes, if you paid me and gave me time to write a Star Wars thing, I could write a great Star Wars thing, no doubt, right? No doubt. And this is another one of those things where I'm like, put me in, not CEO or anything like that, just put me in a position of decision making at PlayStation, and I will make good choices. I know I would. And that's what's so frustrating to me about.
Let me ask you this. If PlayStation called you, but you would have to leave all of Last Stand Media behind, leave all this behind, leave all the control behind, all of the potential upward success coming your way behind, but they would say, we'll give you a 5-year contract. We'll pay you $1.5 million plus X% of what your games make to help us run creative. Would you do it?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, if I had a contract, yeah. It's not like where they would give me. I love what I do, and I have no aspirations to work in mainstream development. I really don't. I never have. I've told you in the past, I think we've talked about it, that I really only ever investigated a couple of jobs in development when I was really unhappy. And the one that I kind of got closest to maybe nudging towards was an associate producer's role, actually at Giant Sparrow, which would have brought me to Santa Monica. Yeah. And I don't want to do that stuff. So it's like the money would have to be great. The security would have to be great. And that level. So what I'm saying is my answer would almost always be no. But if I had that level of control, sure. Yeah, sure. Like, it's like, yeah, absolutely.
Because if it doesn't work, you just go back to this in 5 years. You have
I go back.
5 years of stories.
I made $1.5 million a year. Yeah. Right. So I'm good. So it's 7.5 million gross, and I'll just come back and do that. It'll be fine.
I mean, and imagine all the things you could talk about, even though you'd have to sort of maybe, layer them in NDA talk. You'd have so much content ready to go.
Totally.
Day one.
That's like one thing that I would do too, is I wish I was more into I would love to know more about their comm strategy. You and I both talk about how we feel about their PR and marketing. Like, it's but if I did something like that, like in this hypothetical reality, it's like, one thing I would be like, is like, we're going to talk. Like we're going to go on podcasts. We're going to like talk to gamers. We're going to talk about things that work and things that don't work. We're going to really inquire and be like an active participant in a way that we haven't been in a generation and a half, really.
Yeah.
You know, I miss those days. I wouldn't get this access anymore, but the reality is no one gets this access anymore. What would happen after every E3? Greg and I would sit in a hotel room and a hotel suite with Shuhei Yoshida and interview him for hours, grill him about everything. And he just sat there and took it, you know, and I miss that. So I think you have to have like, it's not only about the decisions made behind the scenes about better games, no doubt, but about presenting yourself a little bit more like better. I think what they look at it, Jaffe, is they're like, we say very little, we sell a lot. And I'm like, yeah, you say very little and you sell a lot. What if you said the right things and sold even more? You know, like, in other words, they don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to unwind things. They don't want to have a Jim Ryan making fun of Gran Turismo situation, right? Like they had a few years ago. I get it.
I agree partially. I agree in that they're not saying enough. I don't agree, even though I love the fan connection, you know, and I love the PSX live shows and all that. But to be fair, Xbox does that really well. And look where they are, right? Xbox has continued to do that, having the executives pal around with the content creators and the journalists, and they have their fan day. I think they just had theirs recently. Cog was talking about it at the live show. It doesn't move the needle, but what would, I think, practically move the needle for these guys, and maybe they are like, yeah, we agree, we just don't have anything, is a roadmap of some sorts, because you're now asking for $700 for your Pro, and people are going to buy it anyway because they're into the tech, and that's fine. You're going into a Christmas where you really should drop your price at least by $50, hopefully 100, but people tell me I'm crazy for assuming they will. Could I know what's coming? Could you fucking, you know, I get the days of Atari, and every time you buy a game, it comes with a 40-page catalog of all their games. I get those days are long gone, but could we get a little bit of a sense of, is this a good investment or not? You know, it's like they don't say anything. I don't know if you saw the Tokyo Game Show Sony booth unveil of what's going to be there. And I know there'll be a couple of announcements. I assume it's State of Play next week. That's the rumor. I don't know if that's been confirmed yet, right? The 26th.
Yeah, I think it'll be that Wednesday. Yeah.
But the games they're having there, it's like Gran Turismo and it's all the stuff that's already out, and then like Nikki Infinity, which I think looks cool, sounds interesting, but that's that MMO with you dress up the girl and it's all flowery, and you know what I'm talking about? It's kind of whatever. But that's it.
It's I'm trying to think. It's Infinity Nikki.
Is that what it's called? Whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. But that thing, it's cool looking. I mean, I don't know if it's good. I read an article in the last Game Informer, like literally the last game. About it. And I'm like, it sounds kind of cool. But visually it looks great. And, but my point though, is that it's like, what do you guys have coming? You know? And I don't mean that, like, I'm not like, you guys don't have any games. I'm talking about it as it relates to the communication of, excite me about wanting to be in your ecosystem. Tell me what, you know, Netflix right now just had their Geek Week or whatever. And it's like Netflix, they don't need to do it, but maybe they do because they got to compete with Disney or whatever. But it's like, hey, here's a trailer for Wednesday. Here's behind the scenes for Stranger Things. Here's a trailer for Devil May Cry, the anime. Here's a trailer for Castlevania season 2, right? It's just like, ooh, I'm excited to be part of this little family in some tangential way. Sony's just like, yes, whatever. You'll come to us when we call. Meantime, don't bother us.
Right.
That's annoying to me. I don't like that.
It's somewhat of a transformation, because people point at the PS3, and you know all about this, the PS3 pricing and working a second job, and we will sell 10 million of these with no games and all that kind of stuff. Like that was, everyone's like, it's that Sony again. I'm like, no, it's not that Sony again, because that Sony realized very quickly that it made a huge mistake. And worked to fix it. Somehow got out of that mess. I think one of the great gaming stories of all time is how they shoveled PS3 out of a grave.
Because it was in a grave. This isn't in a grave.
Right, exactly. You know, that's exactly right. They're speaking now from a true position of power, and it's a little more concerning because they know their major competitor's dead. Right, as far as the console manufacturer is concerned, they're done. Xbox is done. Like it's not going to be a problem for them anymore. I think now they're looking at, you know, do we work with Nintendo? I think Freedom Wars actually with Bandai Namco is a really interesting game about maybe their willingness to license second party products specifically.
Can you educate me on that? Because I saw your tweet and I was like, wait, that's being remastered or remade?
It's remastered under a license from Sony. Dimps, the Japanese studio that's closely associated with Bandai Namco, is made Freedom Wars and is remastering it under the Bandai Namco banner with Sony's licensing permission. And in an interview, I don't know if it was in Famitsu or whatever, they were talking about how like they're open to doing a sequel if the game does well enough under a license from Sony. And I thought that it's not that Freedom Wars is coming back. That's the big story. That's exciting because Freedom Wars is great. But it's like
Freedom Wars, just so I know if I remember, it was Vita first or PSP first, and it's Monster Hunter, but in Tokyo with wasn't it like Monster Hunter?
Right, that's exactly it. It's only on Vita, and it came out in 2014. It was Sony's basically last major published game on Vita.
Okay.
It sold more than 1 million copies worldwide, so it did pretty well, but it's a Monster Hunter clone that takes place in like a far-flung dystopian future where everyone has these insane prison sentences, and you do tasks for the government to lower your prison sentence to 0, and those are the different quests that you do.
Got it.
Or whatever.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. I mean, I liked it. I liked how Orwellian it was. I think you might dig that too. Like I can't remember the exact verbiage, but like everything is couched in Orwellianism. So like if you want to like quit, it's like some Orwellian term for quitting. If you want to like reassign your character, it's like some Orwellian term for that. If you want to dispatch, it's really cool from that perspective. And like if you do wrong things, like it's like, oh, you talked to someone you shouldn't have in this town, 10 years to your sentence. Oh, wow. Or like it's so funny and so capricious and interesting. And how they just treat these people. This is now going to
be PS5, PS4, PC crossplay
and Switch.
That's awesome. Okay, well, good.
But no crossplay between anything but PS4 and PS5 apparently. No Xbox version either. And that's not a huge surprise, but I love what this means for Sony. And could it mean like the extraction specifically of second party games, of which there are 1 million that are just sitting around? Like imagine if this wouldn't happen with Ninja Theory, I guess, because they're under Xbox and they're doing their own thing, but it's like a game like Heavenly Sword. It's just sitting there. Like, would you be willing to give a team $10 million or $20 million and say like, you're going to have to like kind of really port
not
this?
Not for that. No, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. Like it's just right. It's all of these just random games that are just sitting around. And I'm like, damn, absolutely. So it's not Freedom Wars. It's that they're willing to not do it themselves. And that is pretty new. There are only 2 other examples I can think of. It's when Fantavision came back, some other company brought it to PS5 and PSVR 2. And when Wipeout was getting that mobile game that never came out, that management game, that was being done externally under a license as well. But this reminds me, as I was saying, and you're familiar with this, is more the PS1, PS2, first half of PS3 era, where there were a bunch of games Sony owned, but you would never know because they never localized or released them. And and Mr. Mosquito is a great example. That game just came out. Sony owns that game, but they didn't publish it here.
I didn't know that. I thought that was a Namco game. But
no, like Sony published that game in Japan. Sony published that other game that came out recently, Skygunner, as well. That's why I think they have easy access to these games, because they own the IP. They pay a small license probably to the original publisher. If it's even imagine what those contracts looked like in 2000. Like it's probably, they're probably being like, we don't need you at all. Like, you know,
what I'm wondering is, so it's not really second party then. You're just, it's more of the licensing. So it's not so much Sony going, we want to go out and hire a company to make a Twisted Metal and it's a second party because we don't own them. It's more like there's a great idea on the table and they've got funding from Konami. It wouldn't be Konami, but whatever. They've got funding from Konami to make a Twisted Metal. Okay, cool. We'll license it to you. That's what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when I say second party, because you're right about the nomenclature, when I say second party, what I mean is like games that were second party that they are not interested in dealing with, you know, they liberate them as third party games, and
or even first. I mean, I've seen people, I don't know, racing games don't do well really anymore standalone, but people are like, oh, Motorstorm. There's a lot of love for that. It may just be a minority, but vocal minority. But yeah, I mean, even if it's first party that they're like, we're never going to touch Car Combat again. We're never going to touch Warhawk again. We're never going to touch Gabe Logan again. At least not in the way he likes to be touched. And in that, yeah, I think that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here I have a pitch. Hang on, I want to show you this.
Jaffe's taking his headphones off. He's walking to the shelf. He's looking at his books, pulling something off the shelf, and now he's sitting back down.
So the main religion in Japan is what again? It's
Shinto.
Yes. Now, Shinto, though, do they believe in reincarnation or no?
I don't know. I don't really know the ins and outs of it, to be honest.
Okay, well, here's the deal. this book, Iwata. Iwata died 10 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, about that. Yeah, sadly.
About 15 years. I think, well, yeah, but I think what Sony should do is lead kind of like what they do in Buddhism and try to find the reincarnated spirit of Iwata and hire him. And even if he's only 15, put him in charge, kind of like they do with like the Dalai Lama, but it would be the Iwata Lama. And that would turn everything around. I'm joking, but I'm not. Like, everybody at Sony needs to read this book, and anybody who loves video games needs to read this book. It's delightful and it's excellent. And I'm not saying I don't want to romanticize Iwata. I never met him. Maybe he was a prick. Maybe he was a good guy, but he's just a dude. But boy, the sweet spot of business meets the love of the entertainment you're making. It reminds me of the old movie moguls of movies where, yeah, they were assholes. Some of them were sexual predators and all that, and that's awful and unacceptable. And they were terrible treating other people when they came to being harsh businessmen, but they also genuinely loved movies, and they loved funding and supporting storytellers and sort of really creating art for America. I just don't think we see that. Hell, I think honestly we see that more in Phil Spencer than we do in Herman Holst. At least maybe that's just because Herman's not talking, but I don't ever hear Herman out there talking about, oh yeah, on my plane ride over here, I replayed Baldur's Gate 2 on my fucking Switch deck or whatever it's called. I wouldn't know any of these.
He's too busy putting numbers in the spreadsheets for Concord. No,
right.
But
he's working six jobs.
There are people like Nintendo really controls a lot of, or as over time controlled many of these people, but they exist. Like, I actually think even a Neil Druckmann, although people would laugh, I think is one of these people, although not on like the Miyamoto level or wherever. But there are people that are just Miyamoto and Iwata, Mikami, like a few of these guys in Japan that are still, or, Iwata's deceased, but Miyamoto's still floating around, somehow being paid only $3 million a year, which is fucking hysterical to me. And they're so much far above like what people understand about play, about like the interaction. Like, it's so crazy because I think there are people that get story really well and environment and ethos and all of that kind of stuff. But just the act of interacting with a game, of what you're trying to do in it, pretty interesting shit when you listen to these very specific people talking. It's funny, you said like he could have been a prick. I don't give a fuck if Iwata was a prick. Steve Jobs was a huge prick and is one of the most brilliant visionaries that ever existed. If I were that much smarter than everyone else around me blatantly,
or
about
if you saw what no one else saw,
right, in this very narrow way, if I knew what other people didn't and knew exactly what to do, I'd be like, get the fuck away from me and let me do what I need to do. So I understand that prickliness in some sense. You're seeing things that others aren't. And Miyamoto is I'm going to be really interested in seeing how Nintendo evolves when he retires and ultimately passes, which is sad, but it's true. And I used to joke, like, at IGN, all news outlets do this, but it shows what IGN writes about. We had like a fake Miyamoto obituary, right? Yeah, in the back end with a bunch of them in case he passed away or whatever. I always think about that. And
did they? I wonder back in the day if they had one of me. Oh, creepy! I don't
maybe
know
we might have. Yeah, we might have.
Creepy.
We hired like freelancers to write a bunch of them.
Oh, God.
Which was a dark thing, but kind of. I don't know whose death spurned it. It might have been Iwata's death that actually spurned it. It could be that. But it's just so fascinating to listen to these guys. And
that is when I realized too, when people call me designer, I was good enough as a designer to get by with other talented designers when I worked in the industry. But I was better at directing and IP generation and things like that. But the fundamental understanding of play and interaction, I learned enough to know how much of an invisible art it is and how sorely it's missed when it's gone. I was playing Plucky Squire the other day, and I've come around to it a little bit, but one of the things, for example, is just sort of looking at your game at an abstract level and not a conceptual level. And, it has this mechanic, not even mechanic, but it has this thing you can do where, like in Zelda, you can swing your sword at these bushes. Have you played it yet?
No, I haven't. I heard it was very easy, which kind of put me off.
It's got charm and great ideas by the bucket load, but as a moment to moment gameplay experience, it's, but anyway, but so you can hit the bushes and a lot of times coins will come out of the bushes or whatever. But for some reason, in the 2D Zelda games, that doesn't bother me. It's fun to swing the sword and cut. Maybe it's the particles that fly off the bushes, or maybe it's the sound of the coins when you finally get one. I don't know what it is. But in this game, almost every Zelda-like 2D screen has bushes. And it's boring as fuck. But part of the game is you got to go around almost like you're harvesting and just make sure there's no resources in the bushes that you need. And that's what I'm saying. Abstractly, if you think about your game in an abstract level, it's like, what are you asking the player to do on these screens? Come in and chore away. Or survival horror games that have lots of letters on desk or in desk that they want you to read. It's like, strip away the setting and ask yourself, okay, you're asking me to move the controller to walk into a room and then just stop and read. Is that really what you want your audience to be doing right now? You want them to be reading 3 pages about a die? It's like, no, I knew enough. I learned enough to understand that I'll never really be able to get into the mind at the level of the guys that we're talking about. But it's enough to recognize and respect the art form and go, yeah, you need to find those people and you need to champion them and keep them. Because,
well, dude, you are a legendary designer of video games, and we've talked about this in the past, like
of that time, but right. I don't think I can do it today. Not like I did.
But the things that you taught, Twisted Metal is its own thing, I think, and it was very influential at that time. Yeah. God of War, I think, has been incredibly influential as far as the way people play.
I wish people would have taken one of the best lessons, but very few people did, which is open your game in the middle of something interesting happening. It doesn't have to be a car chase, doesn't have to be action. But my God, come on, man. Pick up the fucking pace. What are we doing?
Yeah,
what
true.
I playing the other day. The fuck was I playing? Some brand new game just came out, but I was just like, oh my God, come on, people. Really?
I'm playing, I know it's a straight up remaster, and but I'm playing Dead Rising. And
right. How is that?
It's good. It's very nostalgic to me. I never played it very much, like all the way through, and really very much the original one. It reminds me of college though, because my roommate had a 360. And I remember I was telling the audience on Sacred, I was like, I remember looking at this game. First of all, I knew Inafune produced it, so I was very interested in that. And but I remember looking at it and being like, wow, this does feel like a new game, like a next generation game. And I remember thinking, it reminded me of, do you remember the Rockstar game State of Emergency?
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of that, but like but it was grounded and it wasn't just one dimensional thing. It was like, oh wow, I'm really in a mall. All the stores are here. Right. They all have products and there's all these things that are happening at random times. It felt so dynamic. So it was really cool and very nostalgic to go back to it. But the game's beginning is so boring. It's like, and I know it's a beat for beat thing, so it is what it is. But I'm like, damn, dude, like, let's go. What are we doing here? You have me taking pictures and talking to people and doing. It's like, dude, I want to just get into this. It's not fucking The Last of Us. Like
even still. I mean, I don't know. I get it. You got to set the scene, blah, blah, blah. But there's a way to set, people always accuse me of it's the ADD Jaffe. And I'm like, the best example is Tarantino, man. I think I've said it before, the Hateful Eight. It's one shot for like 10 minutes, slowly pushing it on a cross or a mailbox or a grave. I don't remember what it is now, and all you're seeing are the credits, but it's compelling because suddenly the background's starting to come into focus and you're like, oh, this is a snowstorm and oh shit, this is a grave who's great. It's inviting your brain to be active, and people mistake that with, oh, you can bore the audience for 30 minutes before the game gets good. And it's like, no, I'm not bored during the opening 10 minutes of Hateful Eight. It's just, it's in my head where it's happening, but it's still prompting the engagement, but
I always think about, I don't know if you played Wolfenstein, The New Order or whatever the hell, the first Machine Games one. The beginning of that game is so bad, and it's such a shame.
The plane where
you're like in a plane. Yeah, dude, it takes like a half an hour for the whole thing to like. And I'm like, what a shame! How many people washed out of this game, and it's so good after this. What were you thinking? I always think about that sort of thing. So it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is they're not. A lot of it is, oh, the writer wants this and the writer can pitch it really well and say, okay. Again, because you need that person thinking abstractly about it as a design. What are you actually asking? Where's the player's mind when they sit down to play this? What do they want from their first couple of minutes of play? Do they want to settle in with a long fucking cutscene, or do they want to just go? You know, I don't know. It depends on the game, I suppose. But
sorry, I'm just writing a note.
Yeah.
I want to take a left turn here because I actually didn't even intend on talking to you about games today, which is funny. And we talked about it for an hour and a half.
I want to talk to you about meat in a minute, but keep going.
I'll talk to you about whatever you'd like. I had thought about this last night when I realized it was just going to be me and you. And by the way, for people out there, I should have said this at the top. We are just really shorthanded right now. Dustin's still gone. Dagan's gone. I like these one-on-one.
So you get what you get. Well, deal with it.
Well, I'm saying from a one-on-one perspective as opposed to having three or four of us.
I know what you're saying.
No, I love you on the shows. You're like one of my favorite people to have on the show. But I love these one-on-one conversations. They're actually my favorite ones. But I know some people are not crazy about them. So I'm sorry. We're doing the best we can to work around the schedule as we slowly, I think, incorporate these people back in and have a more virtuous cycle, if you want to quote Jim Ryan. But I was thinking last night, I was playing Dead Rising. Actually, the Jets had just played. They won. Yeah, put on your Beatles glasses. And I wanted to just ask you, how you doing? Like, how are you? How you feeling?
That's such a left turn only because we're talking about the Jets. And then I'm like, oh, we're going to talk football. Wait, what?
The Jets had a really great game last night. And my mind was floating. I was feeling good.
Gotcha.
What do I got to do tomorrow? This is what's happening. And that's what came to mind for me.
How's Jaffe?
Yeah.
Well, I was real depressed yesterday, honestly, because I struggle lately because, my life is online when it comes to work, right? I gather the news and I talk about the news online. I gather it online. Then I go to the comments online. I run the business online, get such as it is. And I think I just have been recently reaching my breaking point with just the quality of discourse. And so, I went through Twitter last night and I love Twitter. I don't love Musk or anything like that. We've talked about that, but I mean, I love social media, when it's done right. But I was just like, I just started pruning, blocking and muting and going, not interested in this post. They were, because it was just, crap in, crap out. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so much negativity. And so I feel better today than I did yesterday as to how I'm doing, because that really got to me, especially as it related to, I think the story was about the character creator in Dragon Age.
Oh yeah.
Veilguard.
That is an interesting one.
Well, the thing that bothered me about it was people, of course, were mad at the wrong thing, in my opinion. Don't come down on the trans people because, or the cancer survivors, but it's probably for trans people, I would imagine, because there is basically a mastectomy scar and it's a standalone switch. Trans people got enough shit to deal with, leave them alone. But I do agree with the complaint. People say that, but they didn't say this one that much. It's like, it's not so much that they have that. It's that they have that on top of not, and I haven't played with it, so I don't know if this is accurate, but it probably is. They're not letting us make voluptuous women. We can't make big titty women. We can't make nice ass women. Maybe the same applies to buff dudes. I have no idea. And so in that, I do appreciate their frustration, because it's not so much about it. Inclusion, I think, is always important, especially if you're talking about a character creator. Don't use the scar if you don't want to. Who gives a shit? But if you're doing that and you're not even making it just a scar placer, so you could place it over your nipples if you want to, but they're actually calling it out as a top surgery scar. And on top of it, they're basically extracting the male gaze stuff from there, the stuff that, is also often painted as evil by a number of people in the culture wars. Then I appreciate the problem. And I think it's really stupid if that is true. I don't know if it's true. But if you can't make sexy characters and that's not part of the lore, like Fable or something, but you can do just that alone, it's a choice. Mm-hmm. It's a creative choice on the part of the team to say, we don't think you should be doing that. And that's fine. They have a right to make whatever they want, but I'm staggered that EA would invest so much money in a game like this and be so clueless as to the message that is sending to their audience. So, but I got frustrated because I'm like, guys, you're mad at the wrong thing. Leave trans people alone. Leave LGBT, leave them alone, man. They're just people. They're trying to live their fucking lives just like you. But this choice to sort of be kind of like Concord, aggressive against the male gaze, I think that's troubling. So I was pissed yesterday about that and depressed yesterday about that. So I'm mostly good. You know, I'm good, I guess. What am I, Colin? You know, here's what I'll say. I'm grateful for so much in my life. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for the work I get to do. I'm under a great deal of stress right now though, because I kind of put, milestones on myself. Like I assume you do as well, like personal milestones. Like I want to grow, my channel, for example, this much this year, whatever. And I don't know if I've reached a ceiling. I think I'm at that YouTuber ceiling of like, I just can't quite figure out how to plateau, or I've plateaued and I can't quite figure out how to grow. And for me, this was the same with game design. When I get to that, I get obsessed with it. Like, okay, how do I fix this? And it's all I think about. And it's exhausting. Your brain, when you won't shut it off because you want to solve a problem, is exhausting. And so I think I'm just tired lately is how I am. How are you?
Yeah, I'm same tired. Yeah. And it's funny. The negativity is grating on me too. And like being bombarded by it, but also feeling like I don't know how to interact with the world without exposing myself to these things. Makes me miss, you know, I'm going to be 40 in October, so I'm a little younger than you, but I grew up in the analog era and I'm not even sure what the fuck I did. Like looking, you know what I mean? Seriously, like, I'm not even sure like what I was 14, right? And so 1998. And I have cable TV. I have a computer in the computer room that with dial-up internet. Some friends around me. We get Newsday, Long Island's newspaper in the mail. Get a few magazines. What was I even doing? Like, you know, I'm playing video games, playing with my friends, but I didn't feel this need to be so connected. And even when we got cable internet and when I had T1 in college and was really exposed to like the idea of like perpetual internet for the first time. And it wasn't like this. It's the phones that really changed everything. And I hate how addicted I am to it. Not to interacting. Like I was able to like not interact on Twitter. I'm able to not, but it's like, why do I always just need to pick up my phone and look at something? What about this? What about this? Oh my God, what's the score of this game? What happened in this? Who was in this movie? I wonder what this person's saying. Let me just go on my Twitter feed and go for you and see what's going on in there. Okay, great. And then let me look at my mentions. Oh, everyone hates me. And then let me go on Reddit and read all this depressing shit and go on YouTube. It's like, I feel fucking crazy. And the one thing that, it's funny to hear about your drive and all of that, because I really had that drive in a long time. And I feel like for the first time in my life, if I'm being honest, I am like, I have no motivation to do much more than I'm doing right now. And
I mean, that's a nice place to be if you're able to, you know, coasting's just as valid a state as anything else. I'm not saying the product you're putting out or the husband that you are or whatever is coasting, like it's not acceptable, but nothing wrong with getting to a coast speed on the freeway on a road trip and just sitting at 65 or 70 for a while. I mean, that's fine. But if it starts to feel like, wait a minute, I'm stuck, that's different, right? I mean, which one is it?
Yeah, I don't know. Because I don't feel stuck. I know how blessed I am and how lucky I am, you know?
Yeah.
And I've made a good amount of money and have real control over my life in a way that I could have only dreamed about 10 years ago. And I always wanted that. You know, I've lamented in the past that I dated this girl a long time ago that I went to high school with. We dated when we were in our 20s, but I was always chronically saving money and I made nothing. I like wouldn't spend money. I would just put it away. I was always paranoid about not having anything. And I remember, I think I got to like the $50,000 mark or something in my savings account, which was like crazy. And she was like, is that enough? Like, when is it going to be enough? And I'm like, it's not.
Why is it in a savings account?
Right. Like, it's like
where you're making what, 0.3% return.
Yeah. Right. No, exactly. I was so, dude, I'm not that conservative anymore, but I was so paranoid, you know, It's like, I got to hold this. I can't believe I have this much money. And then it's like, it never is enough. and you always live, or I don't want to say you, I've always lived in and well below my means, always.
Yeah.
When I was like kind of funny, I was kind of living at my means, and it really made me uncomfortable. I was drinking a lot and going out a lot and doing a lot of things. And I remember looking at my bank account one month and then looking back a month, and I'm like, I have the same amount of money this month that I had last month. It's not good. That was very unusual for me. And I live in this constant fear of losing things, of losing my money, of losing my house, of losing my marriage, of losing my friendships, of losing my company. And I don't know where that comes from. And it stresses me out so badly that I think my anxiety has really just been acting up in a major, and I'm off my pills for the most part now too, which is probably a major reason for it. But
why did you do that?
I don't want to be beholden to these pharmaceuticals. Like, I need to figure out a way to not be on these things anymore. And it's funny you say that, because my therapist was actually for psychiatry, I see a nurse practitioner, and we have like these good conversations. He's a really nice guy. And he said something to me, which I thought was poignant, because a lot of people don't really, I don't think a lot of people really analyze me deeply. Obviously, it's his job to do so. But he was like, you're the kind of guy who would rather bite on a piece of wood than accept help, or like, he was telling me this when I was like decoupling from some of these meds like Ativan and all that, where he's like, it's okay if you need it. You know, like, you shouldn't feel ashamed of needing it. The idea is like to get away from it if you feel like you don't want to be on it or don't need it anymore. And I'm like, the only way we'll really know is for me to be off these things for a while. And I've been off of Ativan for months, and hydroxyzine for months too. And my Lexapro prescription is down 3 times over to its lowest point.
Okay.
But I want to be able to focus and function in a world without blinders on. And I know they're blinders because I needed them at one time, and they really helped. But
you mean the medicine did?
Right. When I was in California, like when I was in Santa Monica, horrible relationship, horrible situation. You know, I had left Kind of Funny. I had lost all my friends. I was like in a bad way. And those things kept me going. They really did. No lows, no highs, but no lows. And that's where like the Colin's Last Stand, like all of the work and all of the establishment, the foundation came from. But I realized over time, and I was saying this to someone recently on another show, I think, where I was like, I realized at one point that I couldn't cry. That like, no matter how upset I actually felt, like I wouldn't cry. And that was unusual. I'm not a very emotional person, but I am somewhat emotional. And every once in a while you cry. And I realized like, wow, I am fucked up. You know, like but great things would happen and I'd feel no elation.
Okay.
You know, and I was like, that sacrifice was worth it. And if you're really chronically depressed or whatever, I get it. Yeah. And I am depressed.
Yeah.
And because I always thought my anxiety made my depression, but it's my depression that makes my anxiety. At least that's what my therapist has told me over time.
Okay.
And so I don't know if you can relate, but it's like, I want to know what life really is like again and understand things better. And I was even talking about it on Sacred about how much weed I smoke and how that's like the last crutch for me that I don't know if I'll ever be able to get past it. I stopped drinking a bunch, you know, like I was never, I don't think, an alcoholic, but I drank a lot. And I stopped doing that. I still drink like, you know, at dinner and stuff, like, you know, if I go out or whatever, but I don't drink at home really anymore and all that kind of stuff. And the weed is like the last barrier for me. And I realized like people are like, man, you must get so stoned. And I'm like, I don't get stoned at all. You know, like I'm basically maintaining.
What does it do to you? It just keeps you.
I'm just maintaining like this barely above functioning level for me, you know, where I don't want to crawl into a ball, which is how I feel a lot, you know?
Okay. So if the resting state with no drugs and no weed and no,
we get into the mic. I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the resting state with no weed and pharmaceuticals and alcohol is crawl up in a ball, right? That's what you're saying?
Right.
Why would you want to crawl up in a ball?
I want to be able to not crawl into a ball without.
But you can't.
Assistance. Did you say I can't?
No.
Yeah.
Because you have depression. My brother who, and he's on medicine, but he struggled a very long time, like to the point that we didn't know. We thought for a very long time that it was not solvable. And thank God it was. You know, it took some time. But the way he would explain it, he was like, you know, and it just breaks my heart to remember those days, but he would be like, you know, it's like telling somebody to go run a marathon and the person is like, yeah, but I don't have any legs. It's like, I can't. That's not, any more than you could, uh, I'm sure you could maybe be I don't know, boxing, a welterweight, but you could never go in and fight heavyweight just because that's not your makeup, right? I don't know sports that well. But I'm saying that it's something I can pivot to regarding this is sort of how you came to the planet. And there's the good and the bad. And the bad, it's not even bad necessarily, although crawling up into a ball is pretty bad. But yeah, I mean, I let's just say I can't relate to the assumption that because I'm getting some help from inventions that have given me help in the past, that's somehow living a lesser life. I mean, you're sitting in a room now benefiting from electricity and air conditioning or heat. People who've invented clothing. I mean, almost everything around us was manufactured to make our lives better. I don't know why it's a struggle to apply the same thing to the inner world, especially when you've had good experiences with it. But you're not. I mean, my brother was like that too. He'd get on medicine that worked, and then he'd be like, "Okay, I don't want to be on it." Now, if the medicine makes you numb, that's different. If the medicine doesn't give you highs, that's different. Or keeps you too moderate, But that might just mean it's not the right medicine. But it sounds like, I mean, I'm not a fucking professional, but it sounds like you need something, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know, man. It's so complicated. Did you feel like you got to suddenly know yourself in your mid to late 30s? Did you share that, like where you like suddenly everything makes sense to you about why you are the way you are, about like why you feel the way you are, that feel the way you do, that you can't change certain things about you and all of this? This is something that I've really been grappling with in the last few years. And I feel like a lot of that has made my mental state more fragile.
I think I think for me, it was just more varied experiences that in having them revealed more truths about me. So those could have come earlier or later. They just came probably what for me, what it was I had a incredibly charmed life for a very, very long time. And part of it was a need to escape from a loving but very tumultuous childhood. Part of it, though, was I had gotten very fortunate in finding people, sometimes romantically, sometimes work wise, who could balance out the savagery of my ADD, right? So at work, it was a Shannon or an Alan. At home, it was my wife or girlfriend before that. But there was a point where the divorce happened and then the walking away from video games and those people in my life that were those anchors of grown-up life, producers basically, is another word for them, where they were no longer there. And I looked around and it's not that everything fell apart because I had been fortunate enough that I had made some money. So it wasn't like, oh my God, I lost everything. But I realized the severity of what the ADD has done in a good and bad way, And so do I know myself better now? Yes. But I don't know if that's wisdom coming with age or just living long enough to have experiences that eventually revealed to me, oh, this is you. As I've gotten older, though, I mean, I've become much more interested in, and I think we've talked about this, but like the mysteries of things, I remain as agnostic as ever, but I don't know when you say who you are, I don't even know if there is a you. I'm fascinated by the idea that the person I went to sleep as last night is not the same guy I woke up as. I don't think there is a you. I think honestly what it is, and I'm not saying consciousness is not a real thing, but I think it's a lot of things coming together to give you the sense of a permanent you, but there's no permanent you. It's, it just is. It's an isness that you see in meditation and stuff. I don't mean to be all, poetic about it, but I that's how I answer your very broad question.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's what you were asking.
No, I think there is no invalid answer to that question.
I mean, are you finding you know yourself more or not, or you want to know yourself more?
No, I'm finding that I have unintentionally discovered a series of things about myself that have always been true, but that I understand why they are true now. I understand.
Oh, the why.
Yeah, like the nurture of it. Like
yeah.
I feel really bad about it in some sense because it's a fixation on my childhood, and I feel like, first of all, I think a lot of the audience is tired of hearing about my childhood because of Knockback and all the rest, but I feel like my childhood was surprisingly normal considering how bad it actually was in reality. Mm-hmm. And that's a testament, I think, to the quality of my parents as people and individuals. But I don't think, and it sucks because I love my mom. You met my mom.
I loved meeting your mom.
Yeah, she's a wonderful woman. And
she was delightful as a stranger. I always hate it when people meet people like that.
Right.
And they're, oh, your mom's so great. It's like, you don't know my fucking mom. That was her go out in public face. But her go out in public face, and maybe that's her real face, and I know she's listening, is delightful. I really enjoyed meeting her. She's clearly very proud. She was cool. I dug her. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, she's a wonderful person. She's like my biggest fan. She's always been my biggest advocate. And I really, really appreciate her. And it makes me feel bad because a lot of I moved to Virginia in part to be around her. And it makes me feel bad because I realize that a lot of the things that I experienced with her and because of her in a large way, and my dad too, but really because my mom left my dad, a lot of it I think is kind of tied to her. And a lot of my childhood was with my mom and not my dad until I was a teenager. I look at it and I'm like, damn, I really am fucked up from this experience nonetheless. Like in other words, it's like I wasn't physically abused. I wasn't sexually abused. I didn't burn out of school and no one cared what I did all day and all that. Like none of that's true. But there are these major systemic things that I realize like, wow, that explains everything when you think about it through that lens. And it's been haunting in some sense to kind of experience it like over the last few years of understanding where the dynamics in my relationships with women have gone over the past, where I was talking about the fear of money, the fear of moving, the fear of being pulled out of things, my fierce level of independence that a lot of people are put off by, where I'm totally like people don't understand in my life to this day. It's like, don't you want to come out and hang out? It's like, no, I don't.
Right.
Like, and it's like, well, why is that? It's because beginning in 4th grade, I was alone all the time. That's why. Like I watched myself after school from a very young age, I was alone forever. My dad was a fireman and would work these tours. My mom, and I'd be with a nanny. My mom was a flight attendant,
right.
And was working all the time and everyone was gone. My siblings were all older and off living their lives. I was alone. And
so you just got used to it.
I think that's where it comes from. Cause it's like, because I've thought about it over time. It's like, why is it like this? Like, why don't you care about socializing very much? I'm a very personable person. I'm friendly. I'm like, well, it's not none of that. I'm not antisocial. It's like, I'm just so used to being like, yeah, mom's going to be at the base, like she worked at Pease Air Force Base for Delta. She'll be there for 16 hours. I get off of school and I'm going to be here from 3 o'clock till 10 or whatever. And I got to figure out what I'm going to do. And
I mean, you're not, I'm curious though, because you describe it that way, but at least, I mean, you're not a hermit. You hang out with your wife. You went drinking with Ramon a couple weeks ago. Apparently I wasn't there, but I heard you drink a lot,
Oh yeah. I got really drunk.
So, I mean, it's, but you're describing it as if you see no one. I mean, are you thinking that it should be a bigger part of your life than it is?
Well, I think that I'm much more naturally. So I think a lot of it, I lost a lot of my friends after what happened with Kind of Funny, like, and had to really rebuild again. But I think a lot
because you moved away from them.
Well, because I think I was alienated from a lot of them too.
Because your friends were the people at the company,
right? And others that are in their orbit. There's some people that still exist, and I'm not saying any of that is. It's true. Like when people are like, Colin never leaves his house, right? It's like, that's not true. I go out. I have a yard, and I'm outside with the dogs, and I walk around the neighborhood with the dogs, and I'm like, I work on my flowers and mow my lawn. But no, I never like go anywhere. No, like, and I don't.
But does it bother you?
in some, it doesn't, it's not the lack of going places that bothers me as much as it's like, yeah, I do miss in some ways socializing. Like Ramon came and stayed with us a couple months ago for like a week. Right. And it is like a different, Mike even has observed it herself. It's like, it's kind of almost like a different Colin, like in some sense, like, cause he knew me when I was much younger and we have a really deep friendship and we talk about everything. We talk like little girls all night, you know, and about all sorts of music and this and that. And it's like, yeah, I could have this, but I don't put myself out there to do it. I think that I've become very comfortable just being alone. I'm just using that as an example of things that I've identified over time where I'm like, yeah, that probably is where that comes from. It's like, you had to really rely on yourself, you know, and then I tie that through to like, okay, so after Northeastern I get hired at IGN and I just leave like grad school in 2 weeks and go and work at IGN. And it's like, yeah, like you relied on yourself. It all ties together. Like you made things happen for yourself. You relied on yourself. You don't worry about other things and other people in that capacity. But then you get older and you go through the motions in the moment and you don't realize why those things are until they are later. And maybe I'm misidentifying them. If I sat down with like a psychotherapist, I might be like, actually, it's, you know, this and this. You know, but I think,
No, I mean, I have found over the years of therapy that the you know, and I would always hate it when therapists would say this, you know, there are those therapists that say the why doesn't matter, that we're here to deal with the now, blah, blah, blah. And the why is fascinating. It's interesting if you're the one that you're if you're being analyzed, but ultimately they're not wrong that it matters for your own curiosity, but fundamentally, you know, it's not going to change anything. Knowing why you are the way you are doesn't really help beyond just like, oh, that's interesting. But doing something about it, if you arrive at that position, is the only thing that ever really works. And I think, you know, it's like anything else. You'll change when you want to, right? You'll start being social if it really, I'm going to misquote it, but Anais Nin, the writer and then erotic writer, she has a great quote that says, or the gist of it is, change basically happened when the pain of staying in the bud, was more painful than basically learning how to bloom. And so eventually you may or may not come to a point where you say, okay, enough. I want to go do this now. And it changes. Right. And most people change out of pain points, which I hate. That's the thing I hate the most about myself, is that I change when I have to, not when I should. Because that's I lived 5 lives. I remember them all. I've been reincarnated. That's the level of shit you got to, and that's masterclass of being alive, of being able to change because it's the right thing, not because if you don't, you're fucked. But yeah, I mean, look, here's, Ben wrote me when you guys were in town, and I was all week. I'm like, oh, cool. Yeah. I'm looking forward to going out and having dinner with all these guys. And then I don't remember exactly what I wrote him, but when he wrote me with the address, about 10 minutes later, I wrote back. I said, you know what? I said, I'm old enough. The gist was, I said, I'm old enough that I'm not going to make up an excuse. I'd love to see you guys. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I don't want to go outside right now. I'm fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I remember you. Yeah.
And he's like, I get it. No worries. Mm-hmm. And I appreciated that he wasn't offended by it, but it wasn't that I didn't want to be there. And I kind of miss having been there. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, but I'm cozy here. And I'm playing Modern Warfare beta right now. I'm happy. You know what I'm saying? It's just
I understand.
Sometimes you just got to embrace who you are. And, but I will say that the good thing about it is, most people who are successful, it's because they are trying to deal with some rotten shit in the past. It's very rare that a genuinely well-balanced, happy person is able to do much, which might be fine, because if you're genuine and happy, you don't need anything. But most of the people that do the things that we talk about that we all want to do, or we say we want to do, it's coming from a place of a hole they're trying to fill. And I think that's not a bad thing. I think nobody escapes childhood unharmed and unscathed, right? Everybody's got their bag of hammers from it.
That's why I feel bad even.
No, I'm not saying you shouldn't feel bad. You still got to emote it and get it out and process it and all that. I'm just saying that the end result doesn't have to be a tragedy. It's just like, oh yeah, that's why I am the way I am. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. What I was going to say, because I appreciate that. And like, what I was going to say was like, I did know many people that had it so much worse than me, that is true. Like that, I have this really vivid memory of being in high school and going to like a party at this dude's house in this neighborhood and thinking it was like a house party. The parents were gone or whatever. I walk in, the mom is in the kitchen doing dishes or whatever. People are just walking around, high school kids just drinking and a kid is just rolling a blunt at the kitchen table. And
Okay.
I always took that away from this was like 99 or 2000 or something. I always took that away. I was like, wow, man, like this is crazy. Like there's no level of guidance here at all. And I even recognized that at that time, like how unusual that was. And so I know just from anecdotes like that and just good friends of mine whose parents hated each other, who were in physically abusive situations, sexually abusive situations. Like, yeah, I know. Like I know how much worse it gets. I've just been very introspective about that as I've gotten a little bit older, where I just am like, like maybe part of it comes from not being too hard on myself, being like, you were this was kind of done to you, and
and that's probably also why you and me, anybody, I would say anybody who gets to a place of mental health finds the internet a shithole in a lot of ways these days, because you're already dealing with your own shit. And then, and it's nuanced, right? And it's important to you, and it's vulnerable and genuine. And then you go online and people are just their worst selves.
Yep.
And they're doing it to make money, and they're doing it because it's fun for them. And it's a real, it's a real bitch of a cocktail, mixing those things together. I am starting to find, but I don't want to leave it.
No, I don't know how to. I don't even, and I don't want to. I would work on it. I would never not want to work on it, but I do think about that. The negativity. It's funny with the Concord thing is a good example of like people are like, he's doing this. He's lying about the game and he's doing it for clicks. I've already seen these kinds of reactions, and I'm like, actually, I don't need your clicks. I have a subscription model that pays the bills. These people don't expect this stuff from me, and in fact, I know that by putting this information out, you are going to tell me I'm a liar. So actually it's like the exact opposite. It's not.
What are they saying you're lying about?
I think no one believes the budget specifically.
But why? I mean,
which I understand. I wouldn't believe it either, to be honest. Unless you knew who I talked to, then you would believe it.
But people, that's the thing, is somebody just types that shit and they don't think about it. It's like, why would you, of all people? I get why maybe a website that needs the clicks, but you're not in that world, but they don't think about it enough. They just tweet it. And it's the and again, I mean, I'm guilty too. I like drama and I like stirring the pot. I'm not some kind of Mother Teresa. But I think we've talked about that scene before in Chef, right? With Favreau, when he,
I don't
know, when he yells at the food critic.
I don't know if has that come up on the show?
You know what I'm talking about, though, right?
No, I haven't seen it. So,
well, okay. So he plays this chef, and he goes. He really wants to branch out, but he's at this frou-frou restaurant, and the reviewer is coming, and Dustin Hoffman's his boss, and he's just like, "Look, just make the meal we know that everybody loves. We want a 5-star review." And he's like, no, I'm going to make this. I'm going to branch. I'm going to be an artist, whatever. And the guy just writes some shitty shit. And so one night he goes out while the guy's eating there and just lays into the journalist. Like, he's like, you write this shit and you shit all over my shit, and that fucking hurts. And he just makes a big fucking scene, and it goes viral, blah, blah, blah. And that's sort of the inciting incident of the movie. Great movie. But, it's just like there is a point where it gets to be too much. And I don't know if there is, one could argue, oh, we'll just go to Threads. I'm trying to prune it, but it's a real bad part of town, the internet. And I don't know how to deal with it, but I understand the need for it. And the fact that people would think that you're going to lie about it without even going, wait a minute, let me think for a second. This is Colin Moriarty. So this is what he is, who he is. What advantage? All it would do would hurt his credibility if it turned out he was lying.
Right.
Because, pundits and analysts and whatnot, all they have is their credibility. Why would he do that? Right. But they don't think about that. They're just like, you're a fucking liar.
Yeah. I go to the, it's funny, man. Like, I also realize that there's nothing I can really do to change people's opinions about me in some sense. And I think you probably feel the same way. Like there's I think a really valuable Reddit called Games, Leaks and Rumors or whatever. And every time that I leak something, not everyone, but a lot of people are like, this guy's not reliable. Who the fuck is this guy? This guy's lying or whatever and all this. And I'm like, dude, I have broken so many stories. Like, I don't know how you can like rob that from me and pretend that none of that's true. You know,
because
like,
they're probably young. A lot of people get mad at me on my own fucking channel. It's like, well, what do you know? I know a lot, bitch. And I don't come back and go, you know what the fuck I did? But do you know who the fuck I am? You know what I did? I did a lot. I have a lot more fucking experience than you do. Sit the fuck down. But, you know, they're 20. They didn't grow up playing my games. They don't fucking know.
Right. Of course. But I think a lot of it is like just underhanded and meant to like character assassinate and get certain narratives about people moving where it's like, it's like how many, it was leaking the BioShock game not big enough? Was leaking the Quarry not big enough for you? Was telling you that the Deviations game was canceled not big enough for you? Was telling you about the Tomb Raider game and movie not big enough for you? Was it telling you about Quantic Dream Star Wars game not big enough for you? It's like, what? Like that's the thing that's confusing to me. It's like, what did I get wrong? Exactly. You know,
I think when you're on the receiving end of it, because you're one person, you experience it probably not even as it was intended, which was probably just some, I'm going to throw that comment out there. I literally have a guy on my Discord who wrote me about you, and he write, and I don't know him, but he writes me from time to time, and he
microphone.
Me, yeah, I'm looking for where I don't even know. I don't even know what his name is, but I saw it the other day, and he's like, "I'm not fucking with you, dude. Colin Moriarty, he's a fascist," and I'm like, A, he's not. B, I'm not responding to this. I've never responded to you when you write me these things. I've never responded to them at all. But I'm just like, you're a lot of things. Fascist? When have you ever suggested taking people's freedoms away in hopes of them only following your rules? I mean, that's my understanding of what fascism in a nutshell is, or what it would be in an individual. I don't know what he's talking about, but that's a narrative. And so you just got to go.
Yeah, you just got to kind of deal with it. I think it goes back to this notion that I've been putting out more, which is just true, that the consumer of social media is not often the target of social media or the subject of social media. So it's easy for an anonymous person to both say whatever they want and not understand why it's serious that happens, because it'll never be about them. Like there's no situation where they're going to be the fascist. It's no situation where they're going to be the liar. There's no situation because no one cares. And that's true. And that's fine and good. And it's not an insult. It's actually kind of a compliment in some way. You can kind of flow through these places more anonymously. It's like no one thinks about the glove being on the other hand or the shoe being on the other foot ever. And I try to like live in that space. Frankly, it's why I've said a million times, I never talk about people's physical like appearance. Like, you know, the guy's ugly or like whatever, or like real like casting. Because it's like, I don't want people to say that shit about me. Like sometimes you just think about one step ahead and you don't put that shit in the wild. And then you don't
just so you know, when I called a bunch of people in your audience fat.
Oh, you did call a lot of people fat. Yeah, I guess I call people fat once in a while, but I don't care. It
wasn't. Yeah, but it wasn't an insult. That's, to me, it's about sort of getting rid of the fat shaming. It was more of a tactic of going, stop acting like you're a bad person because you're overweight. That's what society tells you.
Yeah, I agree.
But trust me, that guy's an alcoholic. That guy's a drug addict. That guy beats his girlfriend. Everybody, like I said, everybody's got their bag of hammers. Everybody deals with it in their own way. No one has gotten through clean, no matter what they want you to think. And so not you, but these people in your audience, you and me and this guy and that guy, yeah, it would be great not to be fat. Let's see what we can do about that. Maybe Ozempic, maybe exercise, who the fuck knows? But you know what? Back the fuck off, because you're just as valid as anybody else. That was sort of where it was coming from.
I agree with
that. Of course, you know, people took it as like, he's calling everybody fat. And I was, but not, you know, there's a little nuance. I'm not Lenny Bruce, but there's a little heft to some of this shit. It's not just seat of my pants. A lot of it is, but not most of it.
Sure.
Anyway,
I understand that. Yeah, no, I get that spirit. And I feel the same way. Like I worry about the overweight. You know, I think that you've been kind of told that it doesn't. I think you have to be foolish to act like it doesn't matter. But there are people out there that will tell you it doesn't matter. It does matter. Well, you can do whatever. There are people
out there that'll monetize that too, though, because one of the things I learned, because people were always like, I think you're talking about people saying, "Oh, it's healthy," and right. I assume that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like when the people,
that it's like, healthy at all size or whatever
but it's actually not the term. That's the thing. That's the term that's been kind of used to monetize and make people angry. It's health at any size. It's not healthy at any size. So the actual term from like, there's the thing called the Hayes Institute and all this stuff, which is where that focuses, is it's basically saying, look, yeah, it would be great if you weren't carrying these extra pounds that are not doing any favors physically. But even with that, you can still pursue health. It doesn't mean you have to wait till you get to be 100 and whatever pounds and svelte as a fuck, and then you go out to the gym. It means, yeah, you're fat, but you still should walk, or you still should watch what you eat as best you can and pursue health at any size. It's very few people are actually saying, I'm 300 pounds overweight and I'm healthy. I don't think most people would vibe with that.
Yeah, no, I don't think most people do, but I would say that I have seen stuff where that, like videos of that, like where it's, more of a glorification of it, which is fine. That's your freedom of expression. I don't give a fuck what you do. I just say that because it's like, yeah, I worry about my own weight sometimes. I do a lot to try to keep my weight down, and I'm okay. I have a gut a little bit, but I'm doing all right. Yeah. And I just want people to know it's like, you are gonna kill yourself if you like carry a lot of that weight for a really long period of time. So just know that that's your right to kill yourself. I don't care, but I do care. That's why I'm saying it. And I don't like the glorification of, again, it's a freedom of expression, do what you want, but yeah, just the glorification and kind of okaying it tacitly when it really should be something that we're avoiding because it's bad for us. But we don't avoid a lot of things that are bad for us.
Other people way too much, though. I mean, in that sense, because like, I mean, when you say that, and you're right, you in more cases than not, if you don't look out for your health, you're killing yourself. But somebody listening to this podcast who's already walked the road you've walked could go, yeah. And if you don't take your medicine and you curl up into a ball, you may also be heading towards that by your own hand. Right? I mean, sure. I'm not saying, and so I just, when I keep saying everybody's got their bag of hammers, I read ages ago a book by Michael J. Fox when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's and all that. And that's where the term came from. I'd never heard it before, but it really stuck with me. He's talking about how blessed he had been, but everybody's walking around with something, and again, I'm not above it. I judge people and shit. I do it too, but there is, I think, value to, trust me, if you're making fun of that fat guy, I assure you there's a lot of shit you're struggling with as well. And just be nice if you can.
Yeah.
And,
I
don't, for everyone, including me. Yeah. I'm an ass sometimes.
I don't think we should be making fun of people generally.
We're all trying to get through it, man. It's hard.
Right. Exactly. It's like, I think you can observe something about someone without it being like, a judgment of them or whatever. And I agree with that. Like I worry about people's health. It's the same thing. Actually, it goes back to the Dragon Age character creator we were talking about with like the scar, like the under breast removal scars, where it's like, okay, freedom of expression. It's cool. I mean, but like, what are you communicating with this at the same time? It's don't say cancer because we all know that that's not true. So what is it that you're communicating about this that might be taken differently? And I think,
I do think it's a great question. Again, I'm all for it, but it would be nice if a journalist would interview them and say, I see this is in here. What are you communicating with this? And what are you communicating by the fact that you don't allow players, if it's true, again, I haven't done it, to express their characters as overtly sexual or overtly traditionally Western society version of sexy.
Right. Big breasts, big ass, all that.
Why is that not in your game, but other things are? Because everything's a choice, and every choice, intentionally or not, is a reflection of the message that you are sending. I think those are great questions. I don't see a lot of journalists ask those. Not journalists.
No, because
they're not journalists.
The journalists that have best access to a company like EA are not going to ask that question because they agree with it politically and don't want to judge it in any way.
I agree with it politically too, to some extent, but it's a good question.
Well, I mean, it's a vital question because I've never heard of anything like that in my entire life. So it's like, what? It is strange. Again, I don't care. I'm not going to play Dragon Age either way. It's not stopping me from playing Dragon Age or encouraging me to play because I'm not going to play it one way or the other. But I'm just over this kind of fantasy slop at this point. But it's interesting that it's just interesting because it's like, so in the world of Dragon Age, people are having breast removal like what is going, I don't even like, in other words, it's like, what the fuck is this? Okay,
but that one, I've heard that here's an easy answer for that, right? In the world of Dragon Age, if it had just been a scar, no one would have said it, right? Because a lot of fantasy novels and movies and TV and comics, people have scars. It's like, well, why don't you just go to the wizard and say, get rid of my scar, right? I mean, that's kind of what the question is, right?
That's part of it. I mean, it's even just more. It's like this is a relevant thing in this world. People have gender dysphoria in Dragon Age, like.
No, but they also probably don't want to change the color of their eyes. I mean, you know, you're going to ask that about every aspect of a character customizer.
But you were you're right, but I like the scar thing is a good example because it's like what stopped them from just giving you the ability to graft a scar anywhere on the body, and then people put it under the breast, and it's like, well,
yep,
there you go. You know,
no doubt that is a statement, right? Just like it's a statement to say you can't make overtly sexual characters, and that is why it bothers me, is both of those statements together. Because of course, hey, let somebody become a character, role play a character who has had top surgery for whatever reason, but even specifically because they are a trans male. Excellent. Do that. But if you're going to do that and not do this, you know, you should be okay with the fact that there are going to be people who say, what? That seems like I mean, it's cool that the art, I mean, think about how cool it is. It's like when the South Park game was like, oh, the difficulty is you play a black character, right? Remember that? Like when you selected the hard mode and easy mode. Oh, right.
Yeah, that's right. That was so fun. I loved that. Yeah, that was so,
right.
I haven't even thought about that. I mean, yeah, that was
That's
funny.
What's brilliant about the medium, which I love so much, is it's like, look, you are making a statement by almost everything you do. And so what you're saying with this game, EA, is trans rights. I agree. Love it. Keep it up. But you're also saying the male gaze or the lesbian gaze or what, I don't know what the word is, but when traditional sexual appeal is something that we don't want to promote. You're also saying that, which has nothing to do with the other thing, but you're saying two pretty provocative things for the current culture in which we live. And so how did EA let you do that? Do they even know what the fuck you people are doing? I know they are EA, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, it seems a dumb thing, not the trans thing, but the voluptuous thing. I think, you know, do they even know what you're doing? And talk to me about the statement, but to act like, to have a response. I mean, you want people to have a response to it. That's why you did it. Right?
Yeah. I would assume, it's in my opinion, it's no coincidence that the director of Dragon Age is trans.
Yeah. Great.
You know, but like, that's not a coincidence either. And
it may not be, but why do you think that also colors the fact that they chose not to, assuming they did, allow you to make overtly sexual characters?
I think you could actually tie those two things together in the sense that
why?
They're, in my experience, anecdotal as I think it is. I know some trans people in my real life, but most of it's anecdotal. It's like there are two columns of trans women.
Okay.
There's like the trans woman, like Blair White, that pass like in some sense and are very sexualized. But what I noticed is that
porn actress.
No, she's not. She's a political commentator. But
okay.
But she's like, you know, I know she's a dude, so I no offense to her, or like was born a man, so I can't. It's not a sexual thing to me at all, to be honest with you. But she's like, she passes.
I'm looking her up while you're talking. Sorry,
and she's very nice. I've met her in person and stuff. She's a very nice person. But the other silo would be like trans people that are more androgynous and are trying to pass as more bookish, cute, you know, women in some sense. Okay. And I think that's kind of reflected in everything about the decisions in the character creator, from what I've said. Small butt, small breasts, the scars underneath and all of the rest. So to me, I think it all does kind of tie together. The thing that is important for me to kind of communicate is like, I don't think that shouldn't be allowed. Like that is a creative decision. I wouldn't have made that decision. But I think
if I'm running EA, I would go,
They might not know. I mean, it might be true. Like this is another culture of silence kind of thing where it's like, or toxic positivity, where it's like the liaisons between BioWare and EA are the producers, and they might not be saying anything about it. And this might be something that the PR people are just learning about and now. You know?
Yeah, I hope the response is not to take out the scar thing. I hope the response is to let me make whoever the fuck I want.
I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
Unless you're not giving me a character creator. Like I don't have that demand for Dustborn.
Right.
I don't have that demand for Life is Strange. I don't have that demand for Devil May Cry.
Did you play Dustborn?
No, I kind of wanted to just because it seemed like one of those, okay, I have to play it now.
Yeah.
But I hear it's a visual novel and I just don't have the patience for visual novels.
I'm interested in seeing it, but I'm not paying full price for it. I'll pay like a fucking $1 for it on PS Plus or whatever in a year.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I don't have a problem with, obviously, I think what the politics are, but I do have a problem with, and I've heard the director talk about it. I mean, I think his heart was in the right place. He's one of these guys, not dissimilar from me in the sense that, you know, he values, like a lot of people, you know, social justice and you know, making things fair as possible and all that, blah, blah, blah. But I think this is so on the nose as to be ridiculous and so hard on its sleeve that it just kind of is goofy. But yeah, you and me, I mean, I of course they have a right to make it, but it's Dustborn. So what did it cost? $6 million or whatever. This is probably a $200 million EA joint that they really need to do well. And it's a beloved franchise. And Inquisition's a Game of the Year award winner. I know it's kind of like the crash of the video game industry. If you remember the movie Crash, nobody thinks it deserved the Oscar or American Beauty, which I think did, but whatever. But I enjoyed Inquisition. So that to me is why it's more of a story, because I'm like, yeah, they can do it. But do you really think EA is signing up for that? I don't think so.
Yeah,
that's bizarre.
There's just a lot of weird tension between what works and what isn't working and why things are and aren't working. And I think people are gleaming the wrong information about things. For instance, Black Myth Wukong, the success of it. It's like, oh, it's because it's like very anti-DI and it's just, it is a game and it's all this. And I'm like, yeah, but it's also popular because it's like a big Chinese game and there's like a billion different reasons.
And
like
it's really good.
People see success and failure and then they're like, that failed because of this, that succeeded because of this.
It's Rorschach test, right?
Right.
That you apply. It's like Stellar Blade. It's like, you know, Stellar Blade first off wasn't a massive hit, but it was a big enough hit. And in fact, I think there was an article recently, it might've been in Forbes, about people doing exactly what you're saying, which is attributing success and failure and woke and not woke to sort of just whatever they want. And it's like, you're not really, there's no, in fact, they were talking about like games that, like Suicide Squad. It's like, I think what they said was, even though I never really got the sense that game was woke, but whatever, a lot of people seem to think it is. A lot of people are like, these critics that, and these journalists that these people accuse of being DEI and lefty and all, let's support Sweet Baby, they shit on that game. You know, it's like, so if they're so pro the message at the expense of everything else, why is that game sitting at like a 64 Metacritic, you know, where Stellar Blade, those same critics, whatever they may think, gave it a pretty good review. So I do think there is a tendency for people to just sort of paint their view on the events to match their view or whatever. You know what I'm saying? We're saying the same thing.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, the Stellar Blade was interesting because I think some people like sexy games and sexy girls, obviously, and all that kind of stuff's cool, but I think people kind of overstate that people are looking for that in video games. I think that is often a net neutral in some sense.
Yeah.
Of like being, okay, this is something we don't have to or can't be attacked upon. The First Descendant is a good example of this. That game seems to be really popular and people are like, well, the girls are fucking sexy. And I'm like, yeah, that might have something to do with it. But I think it's more that like, it's just fun and it's nimble and people like it. And that's just something to not be worried or bothered by, as opposed to being bothered by these, you know, representation in other games. So, because
I will tell you, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, because I think that if like something like, if sexiness really mattered more than anything else, then there would be a lot of games that would be doing a lot better. You know, like the Dead or Alive beach volleyball series wouldn't be some sort of niche of a niche. It would be the biggest thing that you've ever seen in your life.
We'd be on like the Guy Game 12.
Right, exactly. That's exactly the Guy Game. That's exactly right. And so I feel like people kind of overstate the sex appeal shit. Like, it's like, it matters maybe, but I don't think so. You know, not that much.
I think it's more about, I think the Dragon Age thing really puts a nice point on it though, because I think what it does is it's not, because people have said it's not that the trans thing is in there. It's that it's in there and look what they've taken away. Not like this costs that, but these two choices highlight what some of these people are angry about, which is it's not just that you're saying I have to accept this, but you're saying what I like is bad. And that's one of the few times I've actually sided with that group, which is, trans rights every day, all day. And at the same time, ain't nothing wrong with looking, at a beautiful woman or a beautiful man and going, I'm gonna fuck the shit out of that.
It's just strange bedfellows, I think.
Yeah. I want to say though, and I'm making a video on this, or it's part of today's stream. So I know this will hit after. I never want to kind of do the same content, but I do want to say to you, cause it's so relevant. I think in some ways the press and the gamers owe John Garvin an apology when it comes to this topic.
Really?
And here's why. Here's why. So I'm playing Space Marine 2 the other day. And I like it so far. I'm not losing my shit like a lot of people are over it, but I'm enjoying it. It's really cool. And I don't know that world. I don't know the IP that well. And my guys get to this, and they're all dudes, and they get, as far as I can tell, they're wearing masks, but they sound like dudes. And they get to this point, and there's this badass grizzled veteran, major lieutenant. I don't know what the fuck she is, but it's a woman, and she's old too, right? She's like 75, but she's out there on the battlefield, barking orders, blah, blah, blah. And part of me is like going, hey, that's cool. That's kind of how you do it, right? Which is, it's like nothing about this screams anything other than cool. It doesn't feel like they were like, oh, well, let's force a woman, let's force a LGBT, let's force a black person, a Jewish person, whatever. This is the character, right? And it was like, it was so well integrated. And I started thinking about all the shit that, and I wasn't paying attention to Days Gone when it first came out, but John has linked me to sites where it's like, look at all the journalists that came down on this because it was a white straight dude, or he was flirting with his wife talking about, I want to look at your ass or whatever. And he claims, and he's probably right to an extent, that hurt the game in sales and in reviews, which obviously hurt the game in sales. And what's really shameful on the part of the journalist in that is that he was actually doing it absolutely right. In that you had in that game, it was the main character, but as the best friend of the main character, you had, I forget his name was Boomer or whatever, but you had this guy who was, I guess he was a Mexican guy, who was kind of one of the stars of the game, who was a very noble character. You had this old grizzled woman who was one of the heroes of the game. Well, to some extent, depending on how you played it or what you saw, but he had a lot of diversity in that game and characters that were written in a way that fit into the world. They just didn't happen to be the main star. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you want diversity and you want to expose more people that are only used to seeing themselves, and you say that's important, why are you shitting on this game that basically is quite diverse with its characters, just because the main character doesn't happen to check specific boxes for you? It's no one was complaining. People were getting used to, and it was being normalized. That's how it works, is you normalize it. And you go, oh yeah, can you believe 50 years ago we thought it was crazy to think that, a black guy could lead a major motion picture? That was true. And until the 60s with Sidney Poitier. That was just normal.
Right.
I mean, it had to be, but they just didn't recognize it. And so they just shamed it and they beat up on it because Deacon St. John, for whatever you think of Deacon St. John, oh, he's just typical white guy and he's into his girlfriend. It's like, yeah. So, but look at the cast. Look at the themes. Well, I don't want to do that.
It's a little too complex. I feel bad for Days Gone too. John, I like John, but I feel a little less bad for him because I just think he's got to learn to. Well, it's easy for other people to say to like take things on the chin.
It's hard,
I know it, dude. I know, and I know you know too. And but I also know that any time that I've taken the bait, I've always come out not looking as good as I should.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Okay. But ask yourself about that though. I mean, you're not wrong. And I saw you talk about this on a recent show. when it relates to Garvin, but everything you're saying is right. And at the same time, it feels like one of those things where society has said, we want you to be quiet now. Right. And the right thing, the noble thing, the thing that will allow us to continue to tolerate you is to stop making so much noise about things that bother you. Right. And the truth is somewhere in the middle, but they're both valid, which is like, cause they say it to Cliff Bleszinski too. Oh, let go, lawbreak. It's like, bitch, the very thing that allowed him to make the shit that you do love, which is his passion, his obsession, or John with Siphon or Days Gone, is that he, this was his pain. This was him creating out of a place of love and passion and pain. And so he doesn't get to be like you. He doesn't get to view it like you do. So, forgive him for putting his child out in the world and seeing it treated poorly. And he hasn't gotten over it at the speed that we wish he would, because now it's a little too uncomfortable for us. And again, I'm not saying you're wrong, because everything you're saying is right. But I think it also lives with the other part, which is, a lot of this shit comes out of unprocessed pain, a lot of the creative process. And I don't mean that like it's romantic, like, oh, only good art comes from, I don't mean that, but I mean, it's unprocessed. We're dealing with our shit for whatever it's worth. You can still be a happy person when you create. I think that's why you do it,
Yeah, I get it.
I mean, you're writing your RPG right now, and I don't know how much of it's conscious, but I've always been staggered by how much of the stories I worked on, the games I got to work on, were about something that I had no idea they were about until it was all done, put away. And I was doing interviews about it. I'm like, oh shit, God of War was about that. Huh. Okay. Didn't know that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's not what's,
It is interesting. I get it. I think you're right. It's easy for others to tell people to move on, and
it's fun.
but I also think it's important and even incumbent on people in each other's lives to like keep each other grounded in some sense, to where it's like, I just hope people that know him and love him are telling him like, you shouldn't do this for your own image and your own sanity. Feel your feelings.
Yeah.
And
that's
like,
a good point.
And I think it's important. You got to feel your feelings and go through it. But these public displays are only hurting you.
Yeah. This is the world in which you're sharing it. So
right.
Just know and that will come at a cost, but be okay with that.
And I personally think he's lost the plot in some sense. Like I didn't for a while, especially because I am privy, as I'm sure you are, to some of the things that happened at Bend, but like, and I know why he's upset. And I think Days Gone deserved a sequel in some sense. And I always liked Days Gone, so I'm not part of the problem. Like I always thought it was pretty good. I don't think it was like amazing or anything like that, but certainly if other games are getting sequels, this deserved a sequel too. But
it was a better first game than Uncharted 1 was.
I actually agree with that. Yeah, totally.
Right? I mean, it had a lot of juice, but somebody needed to fucking sit John down and go, you know what you need to do, John? Edit your fucking cutscenes. You ain't Kojima. And Kojima on his best days needs to fucking edit his fucking cutscenes. None of y'all need cutscenes that long. None of y'all.
Yeah, I just think that the thing with Astro really.
Oh yeah.
Where I was like, you have lost the plot, John. Like, if anything,
you're
like
talking about what when he was complaining
that
about
Deacon was in the game, and I'm like, this is maybe the nicest thing they could have done for your game at this point. They didn't. Siphon Filter's not in the game. Like you got something in there, and I was like, all right, now you're just upset. And now it's playing out publicly and it's unfocused. And I know him, you know him way better than I do, but I know him a little bit. I interviewed him for the first time more than 10 years ago. And I've had him on the show multiple times and email with him sometimes and all that. And like, I got a feel for the man and I like him. I think John Garvin's like really smart, if anything, underrated, and was kind of isolated in Oregon for a long time. They didn't really get their credit. They were always given other people's IP. But I think the best thing he can do for himself is to just come out really strong with the next game, and make it
tough because there probably will not be a next game.
You don't think so?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, at least not at that level. And I don't mean that as a relation to his talent. I just, it's so different now than what he and I came up with. And he's a little older than I am. And the idea that, you're not going to walk into a studio that has the kind of funding that his games, at least in the past, would require and say, I have arrived, I'm going to be your creative director. Creative directors are a dime a dozen. It's like we talked earlier in this show. There is no creative director jail, because fundamentally, even though you failed, like Concord director guy, you are so valuable that we know we need to give you a chance again. The brand is the thing, the graphics are the thing, good enough, at least if you're talking at the AAA level for the most part. It's as much as the press wants to, and as much as the PR people want to paint us at the time and them now as, just like movie makers, just like directors, just like visionaries, it never moves the needle. Kojima's games, as great as they are not mega sellers. Even the Metal Gear games have never been, the big games of the year for gamers, but not for like straight up consumers. And that's all that matters. The movie companies aren't, coming all over themselves to celebrate Spielberg or Christopher Nolan just because they love the art form. They're doing it because it makes money. Promoting these guys makes them money. In video games, promoting the brand makes them money. It's not about, so my point is, I don't think John or I have any chance of walking into a big studio and being like, here's a bunch of money, make a game. At the indie level, sure. And maybe that's where he can shine. But I don't think he'll be making a AAA game anymore. I mean, I could be wrong, and I don't mean to be a dick, but I don't know why we'd want to anyway, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, well, I don't know what the situation is with him and Mumbauer and that.
I don't think that game's happening.
Trace War or whatever.
I think it's, I could be wrong. I mean, Mumbauer is a fucking talented guy and a hustler, and so is John. And if anyone can get it off the ground, they can. But I just don't think there's an appetite for an unproven multi-$100 million thing at the time with Web 3 or whatever all that shit was.
That was a big mistake, I think.
Right. I mean, that's where a lot of people were getting their money from. But now that that's kind of been revealed to be mostly probably not really what it was proposed to be, which I never understood even then, I don't see it really happening. But that's just me. I don't fucking know.
Dude, all of the crypto stuff is like, it's explained to me for 90 seconds, and then it's just me being like, what?
Yeah, people try to explain it. I'm like, it doesn't make sense what you're saying.
Some of it makes sense. A lot of it doesn't. A lot of it is total bullshit. And I know that that's where they got their funding from Lethos originally and all that, so they had to kind of play that game. But I think that was a huge mistake. It really injured the game, like or the ability to care about it for a lot of people. That was just easily and I think rightfully dismissed. I don't want that shit in my games either. But I do hope they. I owe Michael Mumbauer an email. Actually, I told him I was going to email him.
I do too. I've just been so busy. He's such a good dude, and I always feel bad because I'm just so slammed with everything. But yeah. I think, I mean, and you listen to John. I mean, John's written like 2 or 3 books. He's so learned, as they say, on a number of subjects when it comes to art. He's got a lot to offer. I just don't think it's probably going to be in that budgetary realm, in that medium. But I could be wrong. Never know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about writing a book, literally, because I've got about 5 game ideas that are narrative based that I don't really want to go through the motions of building a company to try to make them. And they're all single player narratives. So I'm like, I just want to write a book about these 5 designs, get art for all of them, and just put them out in the world. And I don't care if people buy, I mean, I'd love them to buy it, but I want those ideas out in the world, whether or not anyone likes them or makes them or anything, because I do think they're cool. But when you think about the uphill battle to raise the money and get the power and deal with the politics to make a game, maybe when did you see EA's presentation the other day about the AI?
No, I saw that they gave a presentation, but I have not watched it.
Keeley tweeted it, and Keeley got his ass handed to him, but he shouldn't have. But it was basically a proof of concept, or more of a aspirational video of these 2 friends going, hey, let's play a shooter, let's make this. And the AI, the gist of it is that the EA is building systems where it can take its decades of assets and data as well, feed it into a large language model, and then basically use that to let their actual game creators work in AI just by talking to it and saying, make me this, make me that, but also kind of sounds like heading towards more of a Roblox user-generated content scenario where these guys can basically, it was these two people playing a game and it's like, ooh, let's make it now where you can only die by grenade. Okay. And it tells the AI and it does it. And it's like, ooh, let's make the level bigger. It does it, right? It's stuff like that. You know, when games get to that point and we're closing in on it every couple of months more and more, then maybe I'll make one of these games I'm talking about. But in the meantime, I think I'll just write them and put them out there because I think they're cool. And, you know, I'd like to see what the world thinks of them. But Garvin, though, I think if he wants to make games, he could still make games. I just don't think it's going to be at the AAA level, at least at the moment.
Yeah, maybe it shouldn't be either. I actually, that EA idea sounds somewhat interesting because it's like, it's self-feeding. You know, it's not like you're using your own assets and your own technologies to create something dynamic.
But what it is, though, is I had guys call into the show and they were just like, oh, it's soulless. It's not, I mean, it's like, where does the soul begin and end? So is it not soulless if I learn to code and I make the exact same game? Or is it not soulless if I hire a programmer and I tell him to do it? Like where, you know, where does it become not okay for it to be a tool where the soul is no longer there? You've still got someone's brain going, this is not fun. I want to change this. I want to try this. I was driving down the freeway and I heard this song and it inspired me to think about this girl. And that for some weird reason made me think about a level design. I want to try this. It's soulless though, because you ask the computer to do it versus going to school or learning for 6 months how to master Unreal or Unity. And I'm just like, it sounds more like gatekeeping to me is what it sounds like, frankly.
I mean, I can see both sides of the argument because I do think it is a philosophical argument. It really is just about your own parameters, you know?
Sure.
But I do believe that two things are true, that on one hand, we are going to get AI driven and AI assisted games. We're already really starting to get them, I think, or at least they're in development. And then I think the other hand is you're going to be very boutique. No AI was used in the making of this game sort of thing. I think it opens a whole new lane of people to do that kind of stuff if that matters to you. And that does matter to me. So I will be very interested in keeping track of that. It's going to be a market competition and I don't know how that's going to go, you know?
Well, believe it or not, one of the things Astrobot actually got me thinking about, I think about this all the time, but it really got me thinking about it again, I guess, in that, you know, there are these you've played it now, right?
Yeah, I platinumed it. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. That last level can go fuck itself.
The one after you get everything. Yeah, that's pretty tough. That one.
It makes me stressed just watching people play it and go fuck itself. But anyway, it made me think a lot about, you know, like the challenge levels that people were making fun of me of going, oh, I don't like these, they're too hard. They don't label themselves as challenge levels, blah, blah, blah. But I think gamers are really, I think I'm stunned that they don't recognize the fact that when someone makes a game, like when you're making this show right now, I assume that anybody who listens to it, you want them to be able to comprehend everything that we have set.
Ideally, yeah.
You're not, but a lot of these people come at it from a place of like, well, I'm sorry if you know, if you don't know the language as well as I do, that's a you problem. Right? Well, yeah, it is. But ideally, if you have English as a second language and Google has a tool that is going to go, hey, I'm going to translate some of these words that historically we have found you struggle with or whatever. The idea is people who make art or make content to be consumed, they want people to consume it. Right? So AI would come along on that level for me and give me the same challenge it gave you to get the platinum versus going, it's got to be the exact same for everybody, but it's never the exact same for everybody. For you, the fact that you've platinumed it, I haven't even finished the game, right? But I've still played it. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's like, why do you not want AI to give every player the same philosophical experience of every level? Why should Colin have a harder time, Jaffe have a very hard time, and Gene breezes through it? Do you think the designer really wanted that? Or did the designer go, this section I want people to experience as a 6 out of 10 of difficulty, but your 6 is different than my 6? Don't we want that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if we want that. No. Because it would be like saying, take a War and Peace and translate it for a 3-year-old, because that's what the War and Peace they want. It's like, well, no, you got to kind of just get War and Peace when you get there, and that's kind of what it is. And and meanwhile, you're not going to take the Dr. Seuss and make it into a 500-page novel for an adult.
Okay,
it's not for them.
That's such an extreme, but let's kind of deal with War and Peace at maybe the middle school level.
Sure. Okay. Young adult.
Right. Okay. So, and let's just say,
there's a Cliff's Notes of it. It's not the real thing.
There is. But I guess what I'm saying though is, do you think when, what was it? Dostoevsky wrote it?
Oh, Dostoevsky. Yeah.
Do you think when he wrote it, he was going, not a 3-year-old, but anyone who sits down to read this book, I want them to walk away understanding my intention, right? I want them to have not the same experience, because you bring your own shit to a book, of course, but I want them to get the essence of what I'm trying to communicate.
Yeah, but I think if there is an essence, then why not just communicate it? What's the point of all the trappings? In other words.
Well, I mean, the essence of that level, for example, the essence is like, I assume whoever designed and approved that final level was it 301st robot?
Yeah,
Astrobot?
That's right.
Whoever designed that said, I want this level to be the bitch of a level, and it takes you like 2 days, but when you beat it, you feel like a badass. Right? Let's say that's the intention. Like, I've designed games before, and they're, we map it out on the whiteboard and go, this is the peak and the trough, and this is where you have that, sense of I want you to die 10 times, then feel great at the end, right? That's the intention. But for you, so then the question becomes, what's more important for the designer to best as he can guarantee that everybody who plays it, no matter their skill level, gets that feeling of, it took me 2 days, I wanted to pull my hair out, but I eventually did it and felt great? Or is it that I only want a select few to have that experience because most people aren't going to be able to have that experience? To me, I think, there's no right answer, but for a commercial product, I assume most designers would say, I want the former, which is let the AI adjust to give everybody that same experience, because I'll never be able to get what you did. I will never be able to I've watched people play that level, and I'm like, yeah, there's no way in hell. Is that what the designer wants, or does he want my 2 days to be your 2 days? I
don't know. I just think I don't like the way this kind of can be translated to all games, Well, it
doesn't have to be all games, but let's just take Astrobot.
Yeah, Astrobot. But the thing about Astrobot, I feel like a dick saying it, because I talked about it on Sacred too, is like, I'm surprised by how hard people are saying it is. That last stage is hard, like really hard. I died, 25 times, probably more than that, getting it. It was one part of it specifically that I was having a hard time. Everything else was fine. Just one specific part where you jump over these flames and then you go up this thing and there are enemies on it, this ramp.
And the ramp's moving.
Yeah,
right?
And it's like, that was the part I kept dying on that part over and over again. So that was like the specific.
25 times for you.
Yeah, maybe even more than that. Yeah.
Okay, but so let's say, and so what do you take away from that if you're the designer? Is if it was 4 days for me and I quit, but one sitting for you of 30 times, do you like that is being interpreted in very different ways, or do you want the designer to be able to walk away and go, I served everybody the intention. They all got the intention, but they had to have the AI adjust it, so they all got the same experience Colin got.
Yeah,
which was hard but satisfying.
Well, I just don't like the idea you're proposing, simply because I think it then, for me, it's like, okay, so Astrobot was this level of difficulty for me generally, which I thought was kind of easier than most platformers for the most part. I think the Astrobot had a shortcut in its difficulty, which was just not giving you any health, which I felt was like a little lazy. Actually, I would have loved having a Big Mario,
except on the bosses,
right? And that's why I felt it felt clumsy, because they're like, okay, now the rules are different. And it's like, okay, why? Like, maybe just have made given us like a little Mario, Big Mario dynamic, however you wanted to express that,
right? And
make the game a little harder, But
you felt it was a little too easy, the overall game.
Yeah, I was surprised actually by how easy it was. I think that the stages that were difficult were like the optional face button stages that you unlock. Have you seen those before, where they're like,
oh yeah, of course,
the X stages,
very hard
stages.
for me.
Yeah, those were the hardest ones. But even those some of those I beat on the first try, and then So go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm
So-
not trying to brag.
No.
I'm not even really good at games.
No, I don't consider it
Yeah.
a brag. I mean, I don't, you know, but
Aren't you impressed?
no. But what I am fascinated by, though, is so many people who push back on the argument I'm making are the ones that also say that we should support the vision of the creators. And all I'm saying is, if the vision of the creator, and I'm not saying it is, I'm sure you have access to him more than I do. Maybe he should be asked. But if the vision of the person who approved that level, designed it, or just said, yes, it's going in, was, I want everybody to have Colin's experience, right? Why would you not want the game if it's capable? If it's capable, that's we're making the assumption for this argument. If it's capable to adjust in real time based on what it knows about your ability, so that everybody gets the intention of the creator.
Yeah, I don't agree. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I just don't agree in the value of that, because isn't everything made for specific? Is anything made for everyone? Like water, I guess you manufacture that for everyone, or like electricity. But like, what's for everyone? You know, and why would a game?
I'm not saying make it for everyone. What I'm saying is make the. For example, you thought the game was too easy. If the designer said, "Yeah, I wanted it to be that," it wouldn't suddenly become hard for you. It would play as intended. I want this to be an easy game, has a couple of spikes, but it's pretty easy. It's a breezy, easy game that you get through in a couple of days, and you just have it's like bubble gum. Okay. If that's his intention, you may not like that. You may like your platformers harder. I'm not saying it would adjust to make it hard for you. I'm saying it would adjust to give you at your skill level.
No, I understand I totally understand what you mean. I don't want that to be dynamic. At the very least, I think it would be cool to have like catered program sliders about enemy health and.
Do you want it to be functional? Whether it's dynamic or sliders is almost irrelevant. If the game could somehow give you the personalized experience that allows you to experience what the designer wanted, are you opposed to that?
No, I'm in principle, I'm not opposed to that, but I would ask.
Okay.
I would ask why. Like Doom's an interesting example. Like Doom's really hard for a lot of people. It's a very, very hard.
The
game.
new one or all of them?
All of them. But let's talk about the new since 2016 Doom.
Yep.
Like these are pretty tough games. I say that because like I would often play and still do play games on hard sometimes. And that's a game I very much play on normal, because it's like I can't hang, you know? And I don't.
But in some ways, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I don't think that the harder I could do it probably, but I don't think the harder difficulties are really for me. You know, like it's like I found a way to fit into this game and play it my own way. And I think Astrobot's a totally valid thing where a lot of people are finding it very difficult, especially because there are not many 3D platformers on PlayStation. So people are just out of practice, I think, generally speaking. But it is what it is. And I just want it to be what it is. And I think the creation is what it is. The intention of it is baked into the product itself. It shouldn't be dynamic in any way, really. I think that's what From Software kind of argues when they say, like, we don't do difficulty levels. Like, it's not. It is what it is, you know, like it just is what it is. But
their intention, though, if you hear Miyazaki talk, his intention is, I want this to be confusing. I want you to work with other people. I want you to get stuck and then go off and try to find, everybody is getting that because that's the intention. But so I agree with him because he's made his intention clear. And it's like, oh, okay, that's what you wanted people to experience. I get it. But I guess I'm just arguing for the director's vision or the creator's visions to be helped along as if possible, because everybody has different skill sets and everybody has, as you get older or as you get busier or there's a million reasons. And it almost seems like gaming allows us to sort of be ageist in some ways when it comes to reflexes or whatever, right? It's like, I want to experience what this creator made. Well, it's too bad. Get good.
Well, what you're arguing for is some sort of like skill-based matchmaking, but in
in
an
single
AI
player.
single player kind of format,
Yeah.
which is, it's an interesting idea. I don't mind it. I mean, and I'm sure you've experienced this, especially in the disc era when you couldn't fuck with your game after you released it. But
but the fucking end of God of War is a nightmare.
Right.
It wasn't intentional.
And like, obviously, like, I've said this in the past, but Twin Breaker, when we released that, it was so much harder for people than we ever imagined it was going to be. Like, because we played it too many times, you know, and then we started letting other people play the games, and we started calibrating them based on that. And you have to learn those little things, which is really important. So it's like, I want people to be able to access the game. I didn't mean to make it that hard, or I didn't tune it, but we didn't mean to make it that hard. But I'm totally sympathetic to the idea of like getting more and more people in. I also realize that just a lot of things aren't for me. 4X games are not for me, or like, you know, RTS games generally are not for me. And it's like, you can make them easier and more appealing and all of that, but it's like, I want you to make your games for your people. I'll make games for my people. If anything, I feel like I've listened to the audience too much in some ways, in disappointing ways for our games, like, and then been wrong about all of the things I've listened to them about. So with Twin Breaker, too much story. Everyone was like, too much story. It was supposed to be ironic, but okay. I'm like, all right, too much story. So when we put Hyproxia 2 out, I only gave like an intro and outro and like really like very little story in the middle. And then people were like, where's the story? So then I went in and patched the story into the game. And then we put up Super Perils of Baking. I'm like, all right, so now I'm going to like really, I'm going to integrate the story into the game a great deal. We're going to do a lot of writing. This is what people want. It's like, no, we don't want the story. It's like, all right, I don't know what to, you know, so I realize we can't please everyone, and I wouldn't even want to try. You know,
and I know you understand what I'm saying. I'm just, when you go to examples like that, though, it's exactly the opposite of what I want. I want the vision of you to be able to be experienced by more people. I don't want the game to become everything to all people. So if it's a 4X game and that's what the guys who made Civ 7 want to make, that's just like, it's a no-go. Colin's not playing it. The game's not going to suddenly become a 16-bit RPG for Colin. I mean, that's holodeck shit. That'll happen, but that's not what we're talking about right now. You know, this is more, hey, if you're going to play this game, we want you to experience Sid Meier's vision. And we appreciate that everybody has different cognitive abilities, and everybody, just like we appreciate that some people are colorblind, or some people's right hand doesn't work as well as it used to, or some people don't have the reflexes. And so we're going to provide that so everybody can experience it. But it's still the vision of the creators, but we'll see. I usually am on the losing end of this argument with most people. So I can tell you, as a guy who's made games too, I always want people to have the experience that was intended. But that may just be me.
Yeah, I get it. I think that part of the equation is being willing to receive what the product is, you know, and making everything dynamic in such a way that everything could be for everyone, or things could be for more people, let's say. I just don't think that solves like any problems, you know. Because I get it. I totally get, like, you are talking about a utopian ideal of game design, basically. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know. But I like the idea that games fit on a spectrum, that Cuphead was so hard for me, and I'm really good at 2D. Those are like the only games I'm really good at are 2D games. And that game was so fucking hard for me that when I found out that my nephew, who was in high school at the time, beat it, I was so deeply embarrassed, but I owned it. I'm like, well, we played the same game. Like, you are better at this game than I am. The game could adjust for me, I guess, but I don't want it to. It beat me, you know. And
maybe it's a question of how people look at the medium then, because I look at least the stuff I'm talking about as, like, it sounds like you're talking about more like a sport almost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I'm looking at it more like an immersive narrative experience where it's like, I want to be taken on this journey that has been prepared for me. But sure, if you look at it more like a sport or a fighting game, then I tend to agree with you more. It's like, well, no, it's based on the skill, and it's even for everyone. But I don't look at a game like Astrobot like that, or The Last of Us like that. I look at those as, hey, you're going to go on this cool adventure and see cool shit and have fun. But yeah, I could see it from your perspective if you're thinking about it like Cuphead, for sure.
Well, yeah, and but it's a fair inquiry that you bring up about, like, there is no barrier really to watching any movie or any TV show. Like, you just absorb it. But there is a level of sophistication and knowledge and understanding you still bring to all of those experiences too. Like when I watch, I just watched The Gilded Age with Micah on HBO. It's like that show doesn't really tell you anything about what's going on in the world. Like it kind of assumes you know something about the 1880s and like the situation and who's president and all these kinds of things. And if you don't, then you're just not going to get something out of it. But it's just this static thing that you can sit in front of nonetheless and watch it. So I understand what you mean, where it's like many things we talk about, a fascinating philosophical kind of argument about game design.
Yeah, it's why design is so cool. It's why it's, like I said earlier, the invisible art, because, it's really what people who make this shit should be talking about and going to school for. And some people are, but it's hard when you don't see it on the screen to really appreciate what you're missing or what is not being given to you as a consumer. So people just accept it.
What's going on with you for the weekend as we wrap this episode up? Anything interesting?
Well, I'm doing I'm hoping to do a stream today.
Great.
Of Gabbin' and Games, and then I'm going to try to finish Astrobot. I probably will. I certainly won't 100% it or platinum it or anything like that. But I do want to try to finish that and then get back to
the
Star
last
Wars.
Battle is so cool, dude. I think you're going to love it.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
really
excited
cool.
For it.
Yeah.
I'm fighting the chameleon guy right now,
okay, cool.
and I know how to beat him. I got busy on Hollow Body, and then I think we're watching Only Murders in the Building, which is back on, so I'm excited.
Cool, man.
So we're just chilling at home. Not again, this goes back to staying at home. It's just like
I'm quite content.
I don't have any. I don't have any plans. I like it. It's starting to get a little darker earlier, cozier. I love it, man. I saw somebody put up a meme of like, oh, it's Friday. Finally, I can't wait to. And it seems like they're about to like go out and party. And it's like, go home, put on my pajamas, sit in front of the TV all week. I'm like, ooh, all weekend. That sounds good. I like being older. I really do.
Yeah,
I miss my 20s at all.
I don't mind having like I live such a blessed and weird life. And I think you do too, in some sense, where it's like, I don't live in the real world. Like I don't feel like I live in the world of the 9-to-5 grind and getting up and going out to work and hating what you do.
I can't wait till Friday if I can just hang in there till Friday.
Right. It's terrible because I know people that are in those grinds, and I think a lot of those kinds of people listen to our content, and I'm really cognizant of that. Like people just grind because they have to do what they have to do, and that's a pretty powerful thing,
But I love when they say things though, like, hey, it really helps get me through the job, or, oh man, that's one of my favorite things to hear.
I love that feedback too. Cause I always like thinking about like the FedEx guy driving around, or like the HVAC guy on working overtime, or whoever it is. It's like,
hello, FedEx guy. What are you wearing? Yeah. What color are your pantyhose? Colin, don't ask him.
Oh my God. I'm sorry.
Yeah, come on now. What are you doing? What are you guys up to?
We're going to dinner tonight. We go to dinner on Fridays. So there's like this new seafood restaurant in our town. I don't eat seafood, but they have a few terrestrial options. Michael loves seafood, so this is an ideal place for us to go. So we're going to check that out tonight. And then the Jets played Thursday, so there is no Jets game Sunday, but I'll be watching football this weekend and playing Dead Rising. I actually think I have to restart Dead Rising because I don't mind it. I'm only like an hour or two in, but it is one of those like active game clocks, and you really got to get your ass moving, so.
Does that make it better or annoying?
To me, it makes it annoying. I'm actually playing with a spoiler-free walkthrough of like this. Like you need to get all these things done before this time. Because it's like that would drive me fucking crazy.
So that's how you get all your fucking platinum. See, all this time I thought you were. Oh God. Well, yeah. Okay. Whatever. I was impressed. I was lying saying I wasn't. Oh no,
dude.
I'm not.
Dude, everybody that gets platinum trophies uses guides. There's no one doing it raw dogging.
And that's horseshit. No offense. I don't mean your trophies are.
You have to still execute. You still have to execute on all.
I know, but this it drives me batshit. All these people. You don't finish games, Jaffe. You use guides, bitch. Not you, but the collective. I
love strategy guides. I don't use them.
I hate them.
It's funny, man. Astrobot was one of the first games I played in a long time where I didn't have to look anything up. And until I did have to look up how to get some of the bronzes after I beat the game, but the in-game help is so good that I was like, oh.
You mean on PlayStation?
Yeah, like the stuff like the clips people put up the game communicates so well about what you're missing and where it is. So it's like you get Astrobot 1 and then you get Astrobot 3. So you're like somewhere in between these two, I missed one.
I love that. I love
it's just so logical. Like it's not reinventing the wheel. It's so good. And then you just click on the PSN knows you click the PlayStation button, you go to game help, and it's like you're missing bot 2. And then you click on the little thing and it just shows you how to get it. And I'm like, that's awesome. Like that's the kind of shit you're talking about in some sense of making it more accessible.
No, it's not.
So you hate that. So you hate that you want the game you want me to be able to beat the game easier, but you don't want me to be able to find the Astrobot.
I don't want you. No, I want, if the director wanted Astrobot 2 in that level, the second Astrobot, to be a pain in the ass, I want it to be a pain in the ass for you and for me at the exact level.
Yeah, I get it.
I don't want you, because you've got, amazing reflexes. You can make a jump where you can have a vantage point to see them, but it takes me 4 days to make that jump. That's where I complain. But let me ask you this. When you're making the RPG, you're not going to make that going in order. Like, I assume you want everything the player needs to know to truly enjoy that game to be in the game. You don't want them to have to go to the internet, do you?
No.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Gamers have become so you shouldn't accept that, right? They're like, oh, we'll just get a guide or go on the internet. I don't want to have to go on the internet. It's the game's job to entertain me and to communicate what it needs to communicate. People are like, oh, well, that in Astrobot, that's challenge level. How do you know that? How did you know those were challenge levels? Maybe you just intuitively knew, but I didn't. The game up until those challenge levels popped with I think it's the triangles, the first ones,
right,
was pretty fucking easy. And so I'd gotten conditioned to chasing and gold flagging every planet, every place I went to. I won all the robots, all the puzzle pieces. And suddenly I'm like, what the fuck is this? And people, it's challenge level. Well, how do you know? Well, that's what the internet said. Well, forgive me for not using a crutch that is the internet and thinking the $60 game I just paid for would do all of the work and prepare the whole meal. I didn't know I had to bring my own fucking bread to the Olive Garden. Sorry.
It's funny to do too, because I think one of the things that makes Astrobot easy, it's not intuitively easy. If you don't know how to play 3D platformers, you're not going to be able to have an easy time with it. But I think it's the forgiving nature of the checkpoints combined with the really fast loading of the SSD, where there's like almost no penalty for dying. So I actually would play very flippantly, where I would die more often than I should in some stages because I'm just playing like an asshole, because I'm like, this game is so, I'm not playing carefully. That was what was so weird about the challenge stages, and then that last stage, that 301st bot stage, where it's like, I actually have to play, like I have to like lean forward and play this game now.
Yes.
And so that is one of the things that I think makes it a little easier. I was surprised. And that's what I think can make the game harder. Is like, get rid of half these checkpoints, like maybe increase enemies by a third, like let's do some things here. But maybe in the sequel, maybe a new game plus would be kind of cool too, so.
Yeah, I could see that. The one more quick thing on that, not Astrobot, but I lost my name. I know, the SSD. The fast loading, like I fell in love with From Software, even though I played fucking, Kingsfield. I mean, I knew who they were and shit, but I fell in love with them mostly because the SSD on Demon Souls. Because if it wasn't for that fucking loading when you die, I'm just on the originals. I'm like, go fuck yourself. But when you die and you come right back, I love. That's like magic to me when the technology and the game design come together, and it creates this experience that you would have never had before. And it's not sexy. Like, it's not something you're going to put on a commercial, but that makes a huge difference. If Astrobot, when you die, it would have been like, a 10-second reload, like back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck.
Oh, it was the worst. There were games where it was like it dying was the worst. Because it's like,
because
oh my
of
God.
that.
Now you have to sit here for 15 seconds and I've noticed in 2D games, like a lot of the kind of more obscure games I play, a lot of designers are just doing away with lives, which is really interesting. Like, and Shovel Knight was really the first game I think of consequence to really start doing that in that space. But I like that because I played Panzer Paladin and Lords of Exile back to back, and Panzer Paladin has lives and Lords of Exile doesn't. And it's like, that is a real evening of the difficulty level when you don't have to worry about that shit anymore, because you have to execute over and over and over again, as opposed to like, it's like playing Weakest Link. And then you fuck up in the boss and you're like all the way back to the beginning.
Now you have to be careful though, because if Herman's listening, here's what Herman probably would. I don't know who would do it. Probably Jim Ryan would have done it. But what they could have done is said, oh, you died in Astrobot? Give us a quarter. We'll give you one of those little cards that floats behind them. Right. So every time you die, you could restart or Returnal. I would have probably made him $100 just in putting more.
Oh my God. I know. That was one of those games though, of like, I conquered that game. I was so proud of myself. Because that game had me by the balls, like where I was like, oh my God, this game's beating my face in. and it
I
annoyed
love
me.
that game, but it's too fucking hard.
It is hard as fuck.
All right.
Well,
you guys have a good weekend, and I appreciate you having me on. It's always fun.
yeah, man.
And I'm around. Hit me up. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, it was good to have you here. And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of Last Stand Media and Constellation and all the rest. Patreon.com/Last Stand Media for Patreon support and laststandmedia.store for merch. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Constellation is a product of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by and is directed and hosted by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is my brother, Dagan Moriarty. The show is produced by Last Stand's executive producer, Dustin Furman, and is edited by associate producer, Ben Smith. All Last Stand theme music is by Ramon Narvaez, and all of our graphics and logos are by Dagan Moriarty. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's podcasts, including Constellation, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest support tier, and we're infinitely grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor.